Hello, and welcome to Topical, Rationalizing the Monkey Brain, where we go into way more depth than you could ever need, but perhaps you want it. I'm Ryan Moret, and I'm the host of this beautiful podcast, and today with me I have Bijan. So that's exciting. Say hi, Bijan.
Oh, hello, Ryan. I'm glad to be here. I enjoy the intro with Analyzing the Monkey Brain.
Yeah, it's pretty good. It's better than music, certainly.
Oh, I most certainly agree with that.
So the big plan for today is we're probably going to talk about a bunch of soccer. I know you like that, and we'll probably get into some personal questions. That's always fun, and if you're feeling up for it, maybe some political ones.
Ooh, that sounds great.
Okay, cool. So let's get started then. So this is an interesting question. I don't know how you're really going to respond to this, but would you rather watch cricket or baseball?
Um, Honestly, baseball is quite boring, and I have no interest in that whatsoever. And cricket, if I watch it, I could learn something new. So I would much rather watch cricket over baseball.
Yeah, I'm surprised that cricket isn't bigger. It's worldwide compared to baseball's American, and baseball for some reason decided to do like a 90 degrees in front of you is in play, but then it's 360 degrees for cricket. I think it's
Oh,
pretty interesting.
that is pretty interesting. I don't know how the game itself works, but it's quite similar in nature to baseball. So yeah, that's all I know about it. I would love to learn more.
Yeah, I have a very limited understanding myself. So, what have you thought of the Premier League season so far this year?
Well, it is very evident that money is very important now in soccer because Manchester City is at the very top, and that is due to the influx of money that their team has received
No,
from.
definitely. Has it ever not been the case though?
Well, you used to originally in soccer, you can only have players from your own country. Like this was a long time ago when you couldn't export players from country to country. So you just develop your own players and then improve. But these days, you just buy a player from any country, and the more players you can buy, the better you are.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. That was probably like a 19th century thing or something.
Yeah, I think it might have been in the '70s around then.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but like currently they are points above everybody else. They on like they haven't lost a single game. Manchester City,
Oh, yeah, I see
and
that.
and
Wow.
yeah, like that is all due to money. They were unknown basically 5 years ago.
Wow.
Not 5 years ago, maybe like 10 years ago, and now they're winning season after season.
So they were kind of like Chelsea.
Oh, they were never like Chelsea. I remember a while back when they won uh, their first season title in forever. Manchester United in their own stadium had the number of years that Manchester City hadn't won anything,
Mm-hmm.
and that went to like 30 something. And then
Oh,
once
wow.
it was bought by some rich person, that instantly changed.
So was Manchester City always in EPL, or were they down in like the Championship League or something?
They were always in the EPL, but they just weren't a top team competitor. It was always the Liverpools, the Arsenals, the Chelseas, Manchester United, but never Manchester City.
Okay, I got you. And just for anyone who's like not a particularly big soccer fan or something, basically how it works is the EPL stands for the English Premier League, and it's the top tier in British football. And the entire system works as like a giant pyramid where if you're in the bottom three teams in the league, you get relegated to the bottom tier, and if you're the top three teams in the tier below that, I believe like the Football League Championship or something, you get moved up and you usually see like a group of like six or seven teams that usually are good candidates to get relegated, and a bunch of teams in the football championship that are good candidates to get promoted. And a big but point for why the system works a lot better than something that you might be more familiar with in like North American sports is that it gets that doesn't make any sense, and it makes the games against say if you had like an NBA game between, I don't know, the Lakers and the Suns or something, that game would actually be interesting because, oh no, they might get relegated to the G League or something. So all the games have high stakes. So going off that point, I'm assuming you love the relegation system.
Uh, what? Come again?
I'm assuming you love the relegation system then.
I do. It keeps teams on their toes. I was very shocked when I learned about American football. There was no relegation system, so and it just promotes like people want to win, but they have no incentive to win if they don't.
Yeah, absolutely. And which American sport do you think would benefit from it the most, aside from MLS, obviously?
Let's see. I do not keep up with American sports, but like I feel as if all sports should have a system in place because football, like if if there were more football teams, then people like the cities themselves would benefit more because like it would have like stadiums built, revenue, like a stream of revenue like going into the businesses there. So the more teams, therefore, like and competing. So like if that makes sense.
Yeah, I
Uh,
understand what you mean.
yeah. So I think like football would be nice, basketball, just anything essentially.
Yeah. And going off that point, I actually read a really interesting study. It was talking about relegation in American sports, and apparently, it wasn't talking about that at all. It's talking about expansion in sports. But apparently, as a source of revenue, sports and they only take away from other entertainment sports. If you survey people on like what they would do on like a Saturday evening or something, like they're choosing and to go to the sports game instead of movies. So it's not actually generating an additional source of revenue, but that's beside the point. I'm sure if you had like really strong connections to like an English team, like I don't know, say like a rivalry in like Scotland or something, like not Glass, yeah, Glasgow, for like Celtic versus Rangers. I'm sure you could be very tied to your team, so that's certainly a point for them.
Yeah,
Um,
and also like with every game comes like buying the food, buying the beer, and like that just is like a stream of revenue that like just going to the movies can't buy. It can't like produce.
yeah, you're just throwing more popcorn at the movie theaters.
Yeah.
Do you
So
like? Yep, shoot.
oh yeah, yeah. So like I believe in conclusion that sports are good, but like whatever brings in the money and just like helps out the economy, I am down for that.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts on AFC Wimbledon? Because they're a team that I've been following recently.
Wimbledon. I I do not have any thoughts on them. Which league are they in?
They're in the third tier. I forget what that's called, like League One or something. I don't know.
Oh, I do not follow them.
Yeah. Basically, the whole thing with Wimbledon was they used to be the MK Dons in 2004, if you know who they are. And essentially, what happened was they had a buyout from like some really rich guy, and he's like, "Screw Wimbledon, I'm moving him to a different city." And obviously, that's terrible because in British sports, you don't usually move your soccer team because you can
Yeah,
just
the
make
fan
your own.
base.
So yeah, Wimbledon had their entire soccer team taken from them, and that's pretty discouraging. So in response to that, I don't know if it was the new owners and or if it was like a Green Bay Packers system where they don't have any owners, but basically the entire city came together and they said, okay, we're making a new team, but this time we're not having any single ownership. The city owns the team.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so they set it up like that, and essentially since 2005, I might be off by on the years by like two or so, but whatever. They've moved all the way from the bottom all the way up to League One.
Oh wow.
So
Isn't that like isn't there five leagues in total in England? So
no,
that's a
there's like 20 leagues. It's insane.
oh wow. They have put in some work, and that is very impressive.
Yeah, and like they're really famous for having won the FA Cup as like a massive underdog, because like the FA Cup, any British team from like 8 leagues down, I think, can get into that. So that's really incredible. I think they beat Liverpool one year.
Yeah, that's why I enjoy watching the FA Cup. Every team has a chance to play every team.
Oh yeah,
So, like, realistically, the teams in Barclays Premier League are going to play, but it's just nice seeing the like interaction between like possibly the worst team in England and the best teams in England.
yeah, definitely. Okay, so they started in tier 9. Actually, I don't really know why. Maybe they start them off based on how much money they have. That would make sense. 2004, they're still in tier 9. Then they jump to tier 8 to tier 7. Then they stay in tier 7 a while, and then they jump to tier 6 to tier 5 to tier 4 to tier 3, and then they've been in tier 3 for a couple years.
That is very impressive.
Yeah, it's really incredible. And like they're a big underdog, and because they obviously don't have as much money as everyone else, and they still get sponsors. And I think John Green was a sponsor for a while, so that's how I heard about them. But
Yeah, I always want to see a team from the third or second league be bought by somebody rich as an investment,
yeah,
and then slowly go up in the leagues. Just because, like, if that could happen to Manchester City, it could happen to any team. Like, just pump money into them, and I would love to see just an unknown team be a world champion. Like, that would be very interesting.
definitely. How much do I know in like American sports, people always talk about the salary cap and the this is how much my team is paying for my team. How much does like the average EPL team pay for all of its players?
I don't know, but the price itself of players is going up. I remember it was record breaking when Gareth Bale went to Real Madrid
Yeah.
a couple years back. It was 100 million a year.
Oh wow, that's really
Now you just see teams dropping 200 million. Like Felipe Coutinho, Coutinho, he recently moved to Barcelona, and that is in itself just an average midfielder was about 170 million euros.
yeah. Okay, so I just pulled up the wage bill for a bunch of teams, and in last year, Manchester City had £225 million, and I'm gonna stop now to pull up a pounds to dollars conversion because pounds means nothing to me. Okay, gotcha. So it's like 1.37. So they spent around $400 million. That's absolutely insane.
Oh wow! Are they the top of that list?
Yeah, Manchester United followed closely behind by like less than £5 million. Then Chelsea's pretty close to them. Arsenal's like 20 million lower, and then there's a good 40 million drop off to Liverpool, another 40 million for Tottenham, and then there's like another 40 million. So now we're down to 83 million for Everton. So that's like a little over $100 million, and then it basically stagnates there all the way to the bottom.
Wow, that is very impressive.
Yeah, it's ridiculous that a lower team could win then if they are literally spending a fourth of the payroll of a bigger team.
Yeah, like that's what's kind of been upsetting me about soccer lately. It isn't about like truly the passion of the sport anymore. It's about who's wearing the nice cleats, who has the, like fancy haircut, and it's just like not like classic soccer that I hate.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. Do you think it'd be worth the EPL implementing a salary cap?
It wouldn't make sense for them to do that because like if the EPL were to implement a salary cap, then then they wouldn't be competitive on the European scale.
Okay,
And
so like, what if UEFA implemented a salary cap for all domestic leagues?
that in itself would be interesting because then it would be less based off of who has the most money rather than who has the best skill, who has the best management. For example, Leicester City, they won the league simply due to management and team chemistry.
Yeah. And then unfortunately, their owner got a little big on himself, and he thought that he was bigger than the team, and that them winning actually had something to do with his team, like his skill or something instead of management.
Yeah, like management is very important. Pep Guardiola is currently with Manchester City,
Yeah,
and he is doing amazing. In my opinion, he is the best manager that has ever uh, like
Ever
in any game of
managed?
football. Yeah, ever managed. He has the best record with any team: Barcelona, Bayern Munich, and now Manchester City. He is great.
Yeah, he's been with a lot of incredible teams.
Yeah, like originally when he left Barcelona, he retired, but then it was just Bayern gave him a deal that's too good to refuse, and now he is destroying other teams.
That's pretty impressive. Let's see, what was I going to say? How do you think the EPL compares to a lot of other domestic leagues around the world?
Well, everyone says EPL is an even race, and like other countries, like Spain or Italy, are a two-horse race. But I don't agree with that. There's always like four or five teams that always end up being the top for every league, and then just a couple, like the rest of them, that are just interchangeable with each other, like within league rankings. So for Spain, for example, that would be Barcelona, Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid, and Valencia. And like every league has that. So I don't believe EPL differs all too much with other leagues.
Yeah, I think the only way that they discuss that is based on payroll, with like the top four teams in Spanish football being relatively high. Really, I think about it as top three. I don't think Valencia is that high, but
Yeah,
in our leagues, just Bayern Munich dominating everybody, and then Italy. I don't. It's kind of too corrupt to really talk about, but and
yeah,
then in England, as we talked about earlier, there being like six or seven teams that have a decent sized payroll. Obviously, there's still being a drop off, but it's not like off the table drop off.
yeah. And another reason I think English soccer is so big. The reason that people in America love it so much is it's so fast paced and so objective and so aggressive. And Spanish soccer, it can get boring after a while. Like it's a really slow paced game, and if a team's winning, the game is going to be nothing. Like if a team has a good lead, then nothing's going to happen the rest of the game. But in Barclays Premier League, they want to score more goals, and they fight hard, and that is what makes it really interesting in America.
For sure. Okay, I just pulled up something for the Spanish La Liga. So Barcelona, its average pay is $8.5 million per player, obviously. Real Madrid being 8 million, and then Atletico Madrid it drops all the way to 5, and then Valencia and Sevilla are around 3 million, and then there's another drop off to like 2 million.
Yeah, and like currently, Atletico Madrid, they have a 3 million less of a payroll than Real Madrid, but they're on top of them in the league standings, which is very impressive.
Yeah, good for them.
Yeah,
Let's see. What do you?
like what?
No, you continue.
Yeah, like I honestly think that the Spanish league is the best league out there.
Yeah, it probably is.
Whether if it's Real Madrid, Barcelona, they're always in the top four. And like Barcelona themselves, they used to not buy too many players. They used to develop them on their own. Like Messi, for example, he was a product of their youth team. Iniesta, Xavi, Piqué, Puyol, all of them were the youth team, and they were the best players in the world. And I really respect Barcelona for that.
Yeah, how does the youth teams work? Because I don't actually understand that. Is it like a baseball farm system, or?
Yeah, so essentially, they find gifted players, and then they raise them. Essentially, it's education there, and they play soccer there, and they grow up and get better. Clearly, the education there is going to be subpar because soccer is the main priority for them.
Yeah.
But they play hours a day and improve, and that is how the youth get developed.
Okay, gotcha. Is that how it works in all the leagues, or is that just a La Liga thing?
Many teams have that. It's like just because Barcelona is so big, they have a living quarters, but every team has a youth team that they develop. Like a third division team has one, but yeah, like there's always like a U17 Real Madrid, a and it just goes from every age group up.
Okay, that makes sense. Going back to the EPL, what have you thought of Crystal Palace this season? Because they started off with obviously a terrible goalless streak, but now they've gotten themselves out of a relegation position. It's been really impressive.
Oh yeah, I personally do not follow soccer that much. If it is on TV, I watch it, but I'm not that. I do not follow it that much anymore. But I do respect any team that that can that can pull through. It's because that momentum is really hard to get once you lost it, and they clearly pushed through and did like did what is really hard with such a low team morale, especially when you're at the bottom.
Yeah, definitely. Just going through their schedule, they let's see, how does this work? Okay, yeah, they lost 2-0 to Swansea, 1-0 to Burnley, 1-0 to Southampton, 1-0 to Huddersfield, 5-0 to Man City, 4-0 to Man United, and then they finally won a game after six. But yeah, to go goalless for 6 games and start off with a goal differential of what is that? That's -14. That's pretty rough.
Yeah,
But
like for any team, like if a big team loses that many, like they know they'll eventually bounce back. But a team like Crystal Palace, they're not nothing special, and they bounce back, and now they're out of relegation.
yeah. So just on your point about not following soccer that much, I can't. I don't think I've ever watched a Premier League game, to be honest. I'm kind of like the sports fan that every league owner hates. I just read articles on the teams and look at the scores sometimes. Yeah, I literally talked to Bailey about football and basketball for like 2 hours in one podcast, and like I haven't watched a single game. I've just been reading things, and somehow I knew more about it.
That is really impressive. Like I don't have like enough interest in other sports. To, like the only part of sports I find interesting is the game itself, and I don't find any other sport other than soccer to be interesting. So it is very impressive that you could just read articles and and find your fascination through that.
Well, I think it comes from a oops. I think it comes from a difference in where you're coming from. For me, I like sports because I view it as like a not a simulation, but like a separate system in the same way that like one country would be a separate system from another country. It's a fully enclosed system where it has defined rules and it has people in power and it has people working up, like a working class, you would say. And like I just look at it as like a giant, like a whole new world that you can look at and like judge for like what its problems are. And if you don't like it, you can change something in it.
Yeah, for example, how like the relegation system is implemented in soccer, but
Yeah.
it is not even considered in American sports. And another thing is how ties never happen in American sports, and that happens all the time in soccer. There's just different aspects that every sport does that another sport doesn't have.
Well, you're a segue machine, Bijan. I was actually just about to ask about ties. What do you think about ties? The propensity for ties in soccer. Do you like it?
I have no opinion one way or the other about it. So like it is completely fine for a team to tie, like so long as it's out of like a competitive context. Like when they're in a bracket for the UEFA, they cannot tie. They have aggregate matches, and if they're tied on aggregate matches, they go to penalties. But yeah, like if a team is very even, I don't believe one team should win over the other.
Yeah.
That's why the 1 point is adequate for both of their performances because none of them did anything spectacular.
Yeah, that's understandable. So, do you like the penalty system?
I do. It makes it really interesting. Like, I wouldn't like it to be with every game. If it was a league game and they had a penalty system, it would just be very useless, in my opinion, because if a team's even, they're even. But, like, that just makes it more interesting how there isn't many penalties ever. Though, like, anytime you do see a penalty system happening, it is very interesting and high pressure, and it is out of the ordinary.
Yeah, I can understand that. Personally, I come from the American perspective, so obviously I'm going to be like, no, I want unlimited overtimes. But I can see just based on the college soccer reading that it can be seen as a bit nihilistic and boring with UCLA and another team that I really should have researched beforehand going to like 160 minutes in like one championship final in 1980. But
Wow.
yeah, like it's a bit crazy.
Yeah, I do like overtime because it really shows the strength of the team. Like they have busted their their butts off for 90 minutes, and then they end up going another half an hour just seeing which one is the better team, and that really shows characters of the players and the team itself, how they can work together under such a high pressure situation.
Yeah, I know in a lot of World Cup and like UEFA final matches. I don't know if this is the case for other regions championships, but I know a lot of them. Once they get into extra time, like past 90 minutes, they become very conservative and like they're always playing towards penalties. Do you think that would still happen in an unlimited overtime system, like that they wouldn't mount any offense?
Um, if there was unlimited overtime, like they would do unlimited offense simply due to the fact that they don't want to continue on the game. They when professional soccer players play, they put their all in the 90 minutes, and overtime is just overexhausting them, and it is unhealthy to play for such a long amount of time
Yeah,
in such a competitive context.
yeah, and I actually did some research on it, and apparently just to give you some perspective, baseball in America is where most people talk about overtime because it happens the most frequently at 9%, and people are for the most part fine with extra innings. It makes sense, and Americans don't like ties for whatever reason. But in soccer, the drop percentage is the highest, with the Bundesliga being 29%, so over 3 times as much as baseball. And the lowest
Yeah,
is Serie A at like 20%, so it's not that bad. But if you were to implement it for all domestic leagues, you'd be looking at some places like Secunda B Group 3 in Spain, which is the fifth tier in the Spanish football pyramid, being as high as 40%.
wow. Soccer is just a very, very, very different game. They put the most energy in comparison to any other sports. I saw a statistic. It showed how much distance players run within the span of a game, and soccer was much higher than any other sport. Like football was, I think, like a fourth of the amount of how much they run, and football is like 4 hours, and soccer's only an hour and a half.
Oh, okay. I think I might have found that article too, so let me see if I can find those numbers exactly. Let's see. Okay, yeah, so just going through it, baseball is oh, they don't even have anything. They're like, oh, it's basically nothing. Football, they run about 1.25 miles per game. Basketball, 2.72 miles per game. Tennis, 3 to 5 miles. Wow, that's incredible.
Wow, yeah.
And soccer games, 7 to 9.5 miles.
Yeah, so after running a game for running 7 to 9.5 miles, it would be insane to add another 30 minutes onto that and overexhaust the players. They already put in their all, and if nothing came from that, nothing came from that. It would, yeah, as I said, it would just be unhealthy for the players to go like another like unlimited overtime because it is mentally and physically draining.
Yeah. Okay. So let me make sure that I'm understanding your point. So you think it's insane for them to do it in any domestic league where it's not necessary to determine a winner, right?
Yeah, like for football and like any other sport, I believe overtime's okay, simply due to the fact that they don't put in nearly as much work. But um, soccer is different in that aspect.
Yeah. Do you think it would work in games where you have to have a decider, like instead
Um,
of penalties? Because I mean, I just hate penalties.
I don't think that would work. If a team has stalemated for that long, they are not going to do anything magical after in an hour or an hour and a half of playing more, like atop the hour and a half. Like they're just going to be tired, and it's going to be a very very boring game. If people complain that soccer is boring right
Oh,
now,
jeez.
just imagine players playing after they are exhausted.
Yeah. On that point, do you think soccer should have maybe do like a hockey system where you're allowed to substitute at any time, or do you think it's a point to soccer to have to have the players play the whole game?
It makes it a tactical, like it makes the manager's decision just so much more important. And I respect soccer in like from the perspective of a manager. Like a manager puts so much into a team, and it isn't just the players. So if the manager chooses to substitute somebody, he has to be careful who he substitutes and how to tactically do it. For example, in the American football, I heard that uh, the Alabama person, the last quarter or the second half, uh, got a freshman quarterback, and that was a great decision on the manager's end.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't really follow college sports, but personally, I think it has the same problem as worldwide football in that there's no salary caps and like it has crappy rules and there's just too many teams. Like it's the same thing in worldwide sports, but they don't divide them up domestically. So you'll have like 125 teams in the top tier, which is ridiculous, and then you'll have like 500 in the next tier, and then like it's just too many to follow or feel that you have a good understanding of.
Yeah,
Okay. Anything else you want to add on soccer?
I am good on that aspect.
All right, cool. Would you ever want to learn MMA?
MMA, it does seem interesting. Like as a guy, it would like seem interesting just to get in a physical altercation with somebody. But I know I wouldn't be able to do it. So so
Why do you
yeah.
say that?
Um, just because people have had years of training, and like so long as you know how to fight, it would like you have a greater advantage. Like I heard about a guy like that got he was like five something. He got in a fight with a 6 foot something guy, and he just destroyed him simply because he knew how to street fight.
Oh, okay. I
So,
see. I see what you're saying. So you're saying you wouldn't want to get an MMA fight just straight off the bat.
yeah, it would take years to learn all the skills that a fighter has. Like everybody underestimates how powerful they are.
Yeah, definitely. Would you want to trade in it then?
Uh, to trade in it, as in just learn how to.
Yeah.
I would really like to. It does seem fun, but then again, like all those punches is not good for my head.
Yeah, actually,
Like
I completely agree with you on that, and that's why I really want to learn something like jujitsu, where like you're not punching somebody, you're just basically wrestling, except like you can also submit people.
yeah, because I would not be like realistically, I'm not going to play any sports for my profession. Therefore, I need to have all the sharpness I can have.
Oh, definitely.
I don't think a couple hits to the head, a couple knockouts will do any benefit for me.
Probably not. Do you play? What kind of video games do you usually play?
I personally like multiplayer video games, like Overwatch. Overwatch is what I play for the most part. There's a very large character variety. Like for example, Call of Duty. There's only you can only choose different guns, but in Overwatch you have different characters that each have their own unique aspects to them, and you need to learn how to deal with each of them. It's similar to League of Legends in that aspect, where there's like hundreds of characters, and to be good, you need to know how to counter and deal with every other character in the game. So you need to know how every other character works, which makes it very difficult.
Okay. Do you view games like League of Legends and Overwatch as shooter games or more strategic?
Uh, I am not too familiar with League of Legends, but I would say it's more strategic. But I would say Overwatch is more of just a shooter.
Okay. And you, what made you originally choose Overwatch over a lot of other FPS games that are on the market right now?
There was a lot of hype around it, and all my friends were talking about it, and I decided to put in some time into it, and I ended up enjoying it a lot. So it's just because my friends got it, and then I got it.
Yeah, gotcha. Are you a big console gamer or do you mainly do PC?
Oh, I am a big console gamer. PC does seem nice, but it seems like too big of an investment for a single given time. So I am just completely fine with spending like $400 for the span of 8 to 10 years, and then spending another $400. Then
Yeah, that's exactly my perspective. Like, yeah, a lot of people they like to say, "Oh, building a PC isn't that bad or it's not that expensive," but what it is time intensive. And like I don't know about you, but for me, like if I can just throw money at the problem and it's a similar amount of money, I'm just gonna do that. Like it's not that
yeah,
expensive over the course of
it,
like 4 years.
yeah, it doesn't make that big of a difference to me. Like video games are just something to kill time on,
Yeah.
and I do not care how I do it. Like so. For me, my console of choice is PlayStation, and it gets the job done. So everybody's in a big debate: PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and it really doesn't matter. Whichever one can has the games you like and is fun.
Yeah, I was the unlucky person to buy the Xbox One and then find out that everyone else had the PlayStation.
Oh yeah, many people in our school have the PlayStation 4, which is which is unfortunate for you.
Yeah. Well, luckily, I'm not too big on multiplayer games, which is a bit. I'm actually really into sports games for basically the same reason that I'm into following the sports. I like the systems around it and how I would manage it myself.
Yeah, I used to play a lot, but then I realized I ended up dropping $50 on in-game on microtransactions, and I realized that was a little much, so I just stopped playing FIFA because I knew if I played it, I was going to spend money on
Yeah. Do you make do in-game transactions often?
it. I do not. FIFA just really had me hooked.
Ah, gotcha.
Um, like the less money I spent, the better for me. But in FIFA, you just want the better team. Like you want this specific team, and you need money for it. And the only way you get money, realistically, to buy good players, is to spend money, like actual currency, because there's only so much you can do to get money in FIFA.
Yeah,
And
that's my problem with doing it at online gaming and like having facing anyone in the world is there's always going to be someone better than you. So not why bother, but you're not going to do better unless you fork over a couple $1,000, and that's just not worth it.
yeah, and that's another reason why I Overwatch. If you pay money, you only get cosmetics.
Yeah,
And like Call of Duty, for example, they have so many microtransactions. Like you get an amazing gun that can do backflips, and that's only just because you put a lot of money into it. And Overwatch, everyone's on the same level. It's just skill based.
Yeah. What do you think about the current culture of microtransactions in video games? Do you think it's necessary?
I do think it is necessary for the company themselves, but it creates just a really toxic culture. For example, EA, they for Battlefront, half the game was sold in, and then for Destiny, half the game was sold in DLC, and people just don't have that kind of money. Like I want to have the full game when I buy a game, and I don't want to have to spend money just to enjoy like everybody else.
Yeah, I feel like that's the majority perspective right now, and the big problem for video game companies is that they've never changed the price point for their games. They've always had it at about $60, and as inflation goes up, obviously that's not worth the same amount of money, so they feel like they have to get the get more money somehow. Would you be willing to pay for an inflation adjusted game? Like, if just comparing it to the 1980s when video games were really starting to come around, $60 then would be about $190 now. Would you be willing to get games like FIFA if it meant that there were no microtransactions for a little less than $200?
I am very careful on the games that I buy. So like I only buy like one or two game, like one game per 1 or 2 years, just because it's difficult to just drop $60 on money of money, wait, of money. Drop $60 onto a new video game because I don't play that much video games. I played on the weekends, and putting $60 into something that does not, well, like if I bought the new Call of Duty, played that much in comparison to other games, so I'm just complacent with the other games I have.
Yeah, that's my exact perspective actually. I have a really big problem with spending money. I just hate doing it for some reason, and like, my entire family basically follows that for some reason. But so I'm sure there's like some kind of indoctrination there. But pretty much my philosophy of it is, hey, if my brother gets a game, I'm gonna mooch off of him for like 8 years until the game is just hopelessly outdated. Like just recently, I was playing like a 2000 that as if I was playing some brand new Call of Duty game. And like
Yeah,
a
I was actually playing Wii Sports last night, and we ended up spending hours on Wii Sports because there's so it's just very fun, like very like what's the word like a community based. So you play with each other, and it's really fun to play
Yeah, and
Wii
there's a
Sports.
very high replayability factor with it.
Yeah, like Super Smash Bros.
Oh yeah,
Is still being played just because it's a great game. So I don't believe new games just because are there's so much more development on them does not necessarily make it better. I enjoy the quality of the game.
yeah, definitely. Uh, and like another factor for me is as a gamer, I'm a very completionist person. Like I want to finish the game and I want to be like, okay, I can put this game down and never touch it again unless somebody else wants to play it with me. I'm done with this. So like it takes me forever to actually feel like I finished a game, and like I don't get that many opportunities to actually play video games because like just like you, I'm busy as all get out. But yeah, like it doesn't make sense to just buy a bunch of games and then barely touch them. Like that's like some child that goes. I can't think of a good example, but like children, they play with something for like 5 minutes and then they're like, oh, what's the next thing?
Yeah, I end up like having a habit. Whatever my friends got, I bought that video game, and I just had no interest in it. For example, I bought The Last of Us, I bought NBA 2K, I bought Metal Gear, and those are just not games that I am interested in. But I thought it would be good. Like video games.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Wait, did the podcast cut out?
Yeah, I cut out for like 30 seconds. I'll just edit that out. Cut! So, and speaking about video games, what else do you like to do in your free time?
Um, I I have not many interests. I just either watch which is a really interesting series, or The Daily by NPR, which is very informative. And so podcasts, and I end up scrolling through social media. It's just something to do to kill time because I don't enjoy reading. So yeah, it's just preferable for me to do social media, even though I'm not the biggest fan of it.
Why aren't you the biggest fan of it?
Well, like it just creates such a social media is such a toxic culture. Like people just want validation from others, and uh, it's just I just find it very stupid. Like people watch videos of slime, and if that is not the epitome of killing time, like just actually throwing your time down the trash, I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, and also it just social media, people are less interested in reality rather than being on their phones and tweeting something funny, or just scrolling through their feed and finding something interesting.
Yeah, do you think it's intrinsic to social media that it's always going to be like this?
I do think it's always going to be like this. I heard that like social media is objectively addictive. It is as addictive as any other drug, like cocaine. Like I heard that when people receive texts, and like it is like the rush that they receive from seeing the text pop up is as addictive as cocaine, but it does not have the same stigma as cocaine does. People are addicted to their cell phones, yet there is no social repercussions for it.
Well, that's definitely a hot take. I suppose I should ask you then about something I was going to ask you about later. So, I know Miss Johnson mentioned in biology, I don't know if you have her for dual enrollment biology, but she was talking about how Harvard classifies phones as an addiction. And do you think that they should do that, and that phones should come with a label warning you?
I do think that like kids these days are glued to an iPad. Like they can't they don't read, they don't think for themselves. They're just glued to like whatever just stimulates their mind. Like there's constant visual stimulation, like audio stimulation, and without it, life seems dull and boring. And it, like all of that is definitely 100% addictive.
Yeah, so something I really respect about our generation, and I'm not going to get into something where I fall into the fallacy of thinking that the generation after me is intrinsically worse or something. Everyone's fine in some way, but I really respect the fact that we were on the cusp of technology, so that we were mature by the time that we really got experience with all this new fangled gadgets, whatever. We had experiences like going to the library, which was a terrible experience, but just to have that experience,
That is very true. I
yeah,
remember being dragged to the library.
yeah, but just to know what that's like, and then having that perspective, so you can put it to this, so that you appreciate the device instead of just having it all along your life and you never really get used to it. I think it makes a big difference, and I think in terms of parenting, parents out there really shouldn't be giving their kids devices below like the age of 8. Like that's
Yeah,
not smart.
I don't think so. Like people are saying like there's so many cases of like attention deficit disorder. Like people cannot focus. It's just like you have a craving for a stimulation from your phone, social media, like like whatever is going on. like life in comparison to life on your phone is lackluster. Therefore, people cannot focus. They end up needing to go on their phone to have that sweet release of looking at their screen.
Yeah, well, I don't know about ADD because that's a big reoccurring thing with parents. They always think that their kids have ADD just because kids are always jumpy and energetic, and they're never prepared to admit, oh wait, this is what parenting is actually like. In the pediatric industry, where they're looking to overprescribe and just classify anything as a disease, oh, you have anxiety disorder. Not that anxiety disorder doesn't exist, but and whenever someone has like a random panic attack or something, which is normal if you're not getting them every day or something, they're like, oh, you got anxiety disorder. Let's put you on Valium, and then you're addicted to that, and then you're screwed.
Yeah, like not to like discredit like people with actual
Yeah, no,
disorders,
absolutely.
but it is very unhealthy to just put a label on something just because that's either what like self prescribing essentially. Like you can go to the doctor thinking you have anxiety and get diagnosed with anxiety, and like if like you can just go to any doctor and get prescribed for anything just because it benefits the doctor in the end if they give the medication. So yeah, they won't just say no if somebody's giving these symptoms.
Yeah, it's nuts that there's like a commission system in it. I don't understand it completely, so doctors don't yell at me, but I believe you get a cut of it if somebody gets prescribed for something, so that's not ideal to say the least. And even if that's not the case, I'm sure it has some kind of quota system where like your higher ups will come in and say, "Hey, you haven't been prescribing very many medication. What's the deal?" And
Yeah, like essentially the way it works is like the pharmaceutical company kind of gives a lucrative offer, whether that be dinner or whatever, to the doctor, and they end up prescribing their medication over the like other medication that deals with the same thing.
yeah, do you think there's any way to make the pharmaceutical industry ethical?
I actually was thinking about that, and no, there is no possible chance to make it ethical because money is going to win in the end of the day over everything. Like everybody knows oil is bad. Like it causes climate change. But are people going to stop using oil? Most certainly not. And tobacco is unhealthy, but they are still dominating the world. And they have such influence in politics that there is no way that anything is going to change. Pharmaceuticals, I think, overtook oil just because they're so influential. And for that to happen, like you need to have politicians on your side and lobbyists and others uh, definitely have a huge say in policy making.
Yeah, and that's really where I think that government it either for people it either becomes something that they can't handle and that they can't understand, or it becomes something that they want to do everything in their power to solve.
Yeah, like it's basically useless to try to like go to the government because like in the end of the day, like this is even seen in soccer, money is going to win because the environment. Sure, I would love to help the environment, but do you think like anybody is going to care about the environment in comparison to money? Most certainly not. Like money will win in the end of the day in any situation, which is very unfortunate.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you think you legislate money out of stuff like politics?
Oh well, the whole Citizens United versus F FEC.
Yeah,
I learned about that a couple days back. Well, that in itself is very unhealthy. Just you allow corporations to give money to politicians in the name of the First Amendment, which is just legalized bribery, in my opinion.
I agree.
Yeah, and lobbyists and whatever, they end up like pushing their own agenda like because of money, and it ends up working out. So there's not going to be a day or an age where every politician is pure and not corrupt. Every politician is going to be corrupted by money.
Yeah.
Like that's I did not agree with Bernie Sanders politically, but I did respect how anti establishment he was in that essence. He did not agree with the Citizens United. He really wanted. He was what is it? A man for the like working class, and he just wanted to for there to be less corruption in politics.
Yeah, I can understand that, and if you're down for it, I'd love to talk about Bernie Sanders because I always thought of myself as a liberal, but I've been listening to a lot of not other media that makes it sound like I've been listening to like Alex Jones or like some like Rush Limbaugh. Oh, I did.
Yeah, just slightly.
Okay, I'll just repeat myself. So, yeah, a big trend for me right now has been moving away from too much liberalism because like the problem with being liberal is you have to put your faith in the government, and government is always untrustworthy. So like I've been rethinking a lot of my positions on liberalism and like how government should be run. So I'd love to hear your perspective on Bernie Sanders.
Like I am a libertarian. I and I think there should be less government personally, but like I did have great respect for him because he was there's a word for people like him that are
Noble?
for the working. No, it's for the working class kind of populist.
Oh, yeah.
He's a left leaning populist, and I do respect populism because like I want this economy to like for people in this economy to thrive, and he had his own approach to it, and I respect that because he was honest about it. Like Donald Trump, he has his own populist approach that is very like, interesting to say the least. But Bernie Sanders is an actual accredited politician, and he wanted to do the best for the people, and I do like that.
Yeah.
It's hard to see those traits, those very honest traits in a politician, and I have respect for that, even though I don't agree with him.
Yeah, I mean, for most politicians, it's just political suicide, and Bernie Sanders is just lucky enough to have come out of a state like Vermont, where the Vermont people, like his constituents, they want someone like him, so he can do what he wants to do with it, and they're willing to elect independents. Or I believe it's them and Nebraska as like the only two states in like the past 20 years or something that have elected an independent person to Congress. So like I just feel like he's mostly empowered by his people, and it's not really a case of like a somebody who's really defying the mold, which is unfortunate. But I mean, it happens. That's what politics are, unfortunately.
Yeah, like I definitely think if in the 2016 Bernie Sanders ran, even though he is a democratic socialist and socialist has so much stigma around it,
Yeah, which I don't really
he
understand.
yeah, like he would have won. He would have 100% won the election in as opposed to Donald Trump. He is a serious politician, and he actually has ideas. And I think just the like corruption gave an advantage to Hillary, which that in itself just shows how many skeletons she had in her closet, which prevented her from winning. An accredited politician losing to just a racist billionaire.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Trump's main problem is he's just ultimately corrupt. I mean, if you're coming for business, you're either going to be corrupt or rich. And there's positives to having a rich politician. They're not going to want to be bought, but you've got to be really noble, and it's hard to get really big in business while being noble.
Mhm.
Like you have to be, and like pretty much the only. Well, now there's someone like Alexander the Great, but it's a lot like a dynasty where you have to, and like this goes into my philosophy for it, but you have to find somebody who's like in a dynastic system where he's the son of the rich person, but he's got to somehow be noble, which is incredibly hard to do. Because if you're being raised in a rich system, you're not going to want to be noble. You're just going to want to do what you've always done, and that's use your money for power.
Yeah, what benefit your own self?
Yeah,
And I have I personally have that problem. Like I lead right economically simply due to the fact that I have not experienced the struggles of other people and the hardships that others have, and I am unfortunately apathetic to it, which is very, very wrong on my part. But for somebody that rich, like far more wealthy than I am, raised wealthy, to be noble
yeah.
is
Like
unheard of.
yeah, like the only people from history, and I mean the only people from history that I can think of is like someone like Cyrus the Great or Darius the Great in Persia, and Alexander the Great. That's pretty much it.
Mhm.
So that's incredible. And I'm sure there's like some guy in India or something that I'm forgetting just because we don't learn about India, and maybe like a couple guys in Egypt or something. But I mean, the other problem is if you're noble in politics, you're probably going to get assassinated.
Yeah. Well, why do you say that?
Well, because there's a pretty good history of when politicians feel threatened, they'll use any force necessary to get rid of that threat, and especially in American politics, there's a pretty good trend of pseudo, not pseudo, semi noble politicians just getting the axe when they take it too far. You got people like JFK, which like there's some argument about if it was an assassination attempt, but let's face it, it was an assassination. And I think that Teddy Roosevelt was the same thing, but obviously he was lucky enough to survive his. And who knows, Ronald Reagan could even have been. Well, no, Ronald Reagan was just polarizing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a problem where politicians they will do anything they need because they feel like they're empowered by the fact that people already view them as corrupt. What's a little more corruption?
Yeah. Like, it's sad. Like, and I don't think it will ever be fixed. The corruption in politics, like, there's going to be one good person, but as you said, they get the axe, and there is no real way to approach like fixing the corruption. For example, in Iran right now, the whole system is flawed. The whole regime is flawed, but it is near to impossible to just implement a new regime. It isn't just changing the president; it is changing the entire system, which is near to impossible without creating a power vacuum. And that is like that's just how it is, which is unfortunate, but it is hard to just start a developed nation up from scratch after they have been set in that path for years.
Yeah, Middle Eastern politics really bother me because I feel like almost every problem that they've had, it all devolves from the terrible Saxe-Picot Agreement. I don't know if you know about this, but after World War One, it's basically just the partitioning of the Middle East among the so-called winners of the First World War, which I absolutely hate. As a World War One historian, anyone should know that there were no winners, and the fact that Germany got shafted on all the deals and they had to pay debt for what? So it made absolutely no sense. And I mean, the fact that we look at the West as like some noble force and, oh, look, America's doing some colonialism. They are the policemen of the world, and they will save everybody. It's nuts. Like they
Yeah,
just,
like
uh,
for example, I am your hits really home, but because during the Cold War era, Russians were communists. They did not believe in God. They are atheists. America implemented a Islamic republic in Iran because people in Islam do not like infidels, atheists, like people who do not believe in God. Therefore, they are more likely to resist doing deals with Russia in order to get oil from the Persian Gulf, because that is a area very rich in oil. So America has caused this Iran problem that they are now dealing with. Like every problem in the Middle East has stemmed from American intervention that they now are simply doing nothing about, because what can you do about it? You ruined an entire region.
yeah, and I, beyond every problem in the Middle East has come from American intervention. I feel like almost every problem in the world has come from empirical intervention. And people that say, oh, America isn't an empire, we're above that. Well, guess what? Every other empire in the world's history has said that too. You're
Yeah,
making the same
like
mistakes.
like Africa right now, there are brutal dictators just because of the power vacuum that arose from British, French, Portuguese colonialism in
Yep.
that region. And like people, like they were like blatantly being exploited during that time. But I do not agree with colonialism
No.
whatsoever.
And especially not economic colonialism, like the kind of stuff that China is doing right now in Africa. While it may seem noble, like, oh, China has built a bridge in Kenya, or not Kenya, Kenya's doing pretty well for themselves, I don't know, in the Sudan. And, I wonder why China did that in a war torn country where there is not a lot of government influence. I wonder if China's trying to set up an economic partner where suddenly you feel like both sides are being benefited by the trade, and then oh no, what's this contract I see? China wants all of our economic produce for 2018. Oh shoot!
Yeah, like the word slavery isn't just thrown around, but it's like in those regions there is like the Asian countries, it is basically slavery. Yes, like the prices are lower. Like when we hear they get 50 cents a day, the prices of food are lower over there, but they are living a an awful life, and there's no way out of that system. There's no way to thrive within that slavery system.
Yeah, it's very much a caste system.
Yeah, I think I'm thinking Cambodia. Is it? I'm not too sure. Like they currently are going through a lot of turmoil because they're the only country that has work like working conditions, like actual like adequate working conditions, and to like have clean water. That is an expense that makes them less competitive as opposed to a sweatshop in Vietnam or in China.
Yeah, I find it fascinating that countries like I was gonna make a terrible point about them still being communist, and that's not remotely true. Yeah, they've very much become capitalist countries, even though they still call themselves communists or socialists, which I don't understand people's problem with. But yeah, it's very hard to have global economics because there's always going to be somebody that's going to lower themselves to the point that you can't compete with them without lowering your morals.
Mhm. There is the problem with like such high wages in America, because they like the higher they demand, like yeah, yes, people do deserve to have more money, but people in another part of the world get hit harder, much harder when they end up taking your job because the company moved out into a third world country.
Yeah, something I don't understand is why this is just American politics, but why America personally has pushed so far away from tariffs. Because it seems like a lot of these problems could be solved by just doing tariffs. If you just said, okay, whenever we import a Chinese good, $5 tax on on the good goes to the government, and like this goes back to the problem of putting more faith in your government, but your government's an overarching body, you have to give them some power to fix the problem. And say if you just did that to the point where a good produced in the US is equal to a good produced in China, well, now the economics is about equal, so now the small business can compete.
Yeah, but like that sounds ideal. That
Yeah,
sounds
that
amazing,
exactly.
and I wish it could happen, but like like that would just threaten America's relationship with China,
Yeah.
and like it's already on the fence. Like America isn't the biggest fan of China, but they have to deal with them because they're such a strong, influential global power.
Hmm.
And threatening that relationship would be unhealthy, but it would be amazing for America. Like people are saying, like Donald Trump is saying America first. That is the epitome of America first. But nothing is happening to benefit America right now.
Yeah, really, how I feel about America is they're stuck between the proverbial rock and a hard place. Like their empire's on the decline, and they're trying to hang on to it with all of their might. But there's only so much you can do without jeopardizing all of it and just hastening your fall. And there's a lot of, if you just look at it historically, there's a lot of little pointers that say, oh, this is where America is following the trend of the Roman Empire, or oh, this is America showing its cards, or oh, it looks like America is starting to decline in this area economically, and oh no, what's happening to the Midwest? Oh, it looks like America is fully reliant on other countries. Oh, what's this? America is reaching out to other countries now instead of developing internally. What happens when the internal completely collapses? The other countries aren't going to help America out. And like it just feels like America's moving closer and closer to falling out of its. I don't know. I was going to make an argument about like a three-legged chair, but that doesn't really make sense here. But I mean, you get the idea. Like they're just
Yeah, that's really I never thought of it as an like the decline of an empire is because every empire declines. That is really interesting thinking of it in that light.
yeah.
Like I currently think their empire is doing actually quite well, just because militarily they are all around the world. They they basically are um, like it's basically colonialism for the entire West. Like they have soldiers in every country in the West, in every like European country, and maybe like one Asian country. But they have soldiers all around the world, and that is absurd. Like no other nation has the power or influence to be able to do that.
Well, see, that's the exact problem. Because if you look at something like the Roman Empire, I keep coming back to that because I don't really know that much about our empires, sadly. But if you look at the Roman Empire, around like 280, I think it is. I'll look up a map in the meantime. But that's when the Roman Empire was still at its height. But if we look at it historically, when we look at the internal Rome, we can see, oh wait, this is the era. What's going on in Rome? Oh, there's something bad going on there, and the empire is slowly collapsing internally. But look, they still have all these the military on the outer edges. They'll be fine. Look, if the Gauls come in, they'll be fine. They can defend them. But then they get stretched too thin, and then suddenly Odovaker comes in. He smashes a hole right through the empire. He goes straight to Rome. Rome is completely undefended because the internal system has completely collapsed after just 1,000 years. And despite all of its territory outside, it has lost its internal territory. And what can you do on the outside? You just send in, what is it, Amirius Tiberius, and oh, what's this? He's hiding under a table? Uh-oh. And,
Yeah, like
yeah.
oh yeah. So like currently in America, like Donald Trump is president, and if that doesn't say anything, I don't know what does. But like so he is president, and you see, Af- uh, forgive me for not remembering this. It's either Afghanistan or Pakistan. I think it's Afghanistan is in talks with China now, just because they cannot rely on America any longer. Therefore, they are becoming dependent on other countries that are more stable in their eyes. Like, people do not respect this current regime in America, and China is their only hope. So they're talking to other global world powers that can help them more. And America is out of the talks, which is uncanny.
Yeah, not only are they out of the talks, they're at war with Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And just reading off their Wikipedia page, since 2010, China has increased its economic aid and investment in Afghanistan, notably with announcement by Metallurgical Corporation of China pledging 3.5 billion to develop INAC copper mines. China has the potential to make important contributions to Afghan stability. State-owned Chinese corporations are uniquely risk-tolerant and can help pave the way for future investments. The Chinese also enjoy a more positive relationship with Afghans, making their investments less likely to be targeted for attack by insurgents. These investments can stimulate economic growth that aid money cannot alone. Now, personally, that sounds like it was written by a Chinese politician, but still, it's pretty clear that China is just going off of what we were talking about with Africa and the Sudanese Bridge or whatever it is. They're just building little economic enclaves within these countries, and what happens when those countries become dependent on that outside country.
Yeah, like, there's clearly America does not have their act together, and other countries are swooping in while they have the chance, and that is what China is doing. Like, China's been doing this for years now, but Afghanistan is a pretty big foothold in the Middle East.
Yeah, they're just becoming a bit desperate, and when you make desperate moves, you put yourself at risk, and then you have more problems develop. You have stuff like, oh, let's fight the, what was it? Shoot, I'm trying to remember. Was it the Persian Gulf War in the 90s? Yeah, I think so. So they go in and fight the Persian Gulf War. Great, we secured economic interests in the Middle East. We brought some stability. We got this great leader in Iraq. He's never going to screw us in the back. Cool, Saddam Hussein all the way. A decade later, Saddam Hussein goes against us. Oh, wait, what? Oh, we shouldn't have sided with him? Maybe we should have just kept it to ourselves. Now what do we do? I got it, let's go back in. So they go back
That
in.
is a trend that
Yep.
always, like, reoccurs. That, and like, and people are moving away from, like, going into wars, but it is still like, but proxy wars are happening. Like, so America is dumping so much money into proxy wars in the Middle East that they just don't need to fight. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if both sides just give up, like, currently Iran is going through economic turmoil because they are dumping money into like fighters instead of giving it to their own people. Every single problem would be fixed if people would stop dumping money into other, like, into wars, and just spending it on their own people. But that definitely does not happen, and that is where all the problems arise. It's so much corruption and hate that nothing can like, there's no outcome.
Well, such is the flaw in globalism. If you bring every country to be involved with one another, every country will try and be the most involved. And what power do you have over yourself? Really, I think that's what made America so great in the really the sixth, no, not 16th, 18th, 19th, and 20th century, early 20th centuries. They were not involved in other countries. They stayed out of other countries' affairs, and they were very isolationist. At least in the compared to the Western Hemisphere, they kind of meddled in a bunch of South American countries, but at least they stayed out of Europe. And I think that worked really well for them. The Roman Empire, with it transitioning from the Western Roman Empire, always trying to get involved in Africa and get as high up as Brittany, but then they transitioned after that fell to Constantinople and the Byzantine Empire, where they literally built a wall around the entire place, and they said, "We're staying in here. We're not doing anything. We're just going to focus on ourselves. We're not going to be involved in the outside world." and they survived another 1,000 years.
Yeah, and I just have stopped fighting each other and started just focusing on countries, there would be no problem. But this whole international markets and whatever are just kind of like leading to decline of countries. I like talking about Iran just because I am Iranian, but
Yeah,
there's they there's so much poverty in that country. They used to be a rich, thriving country, but ever since the Shah got implemented by the American government, and then the Islamic Republic got implemented by the American government, everything has been starting to go on decline, and now people are starving and dying because they are so poor that they they have no other option to go out on the streets and protest and just uh, like attempts to do something to get a new government in place.
yeah. So you keep mentioning the like Shah Ayatollah or whatever his name is. He was implemented by the U.S. government. I've never heard that before. Can you elaborate on that?
So originally, England was in talks with Iran and England, America, and in order to like get oil and whatever, like to have good deals with Iran, they implemented the Shah, and the Shah himself, um, like he was very like not necessarily corrupt, but he was not in favor of political freedom
Yeah.
and did not allow people to learn about politics, and it kept the people ignorant. So then, just because there was no political freedom, they were very like susceptible to other like forms of government. Therefore, when the Islamic Republic was beginning to be implemented in that country, they thought it was a great idea because they had no idea of what actual proper politics was, and then they ended up making a very bad decision by agreeing to have that regime implemented because now they are in a state of turmoil.
Huh, that's really interesting. I always thought it was more like a Cuba situation where the U.S. Obviously put Batista in Cuba, and he had America's interests in mind. He was probably just calling the White House every day, asking for them to go over his schedule. But yeah, I thought it was just America had put the Shah in place, and which it seems like that's what they did. And then Khomeini all of a sudden was like a populist, and he came out of nowhere to riot against that. But it seems like that wasn't the case.
Yeah, it was not the case in Iran. It is just um, America making their influence on other countries just to benefit them in the short term. But now clearly it is backstabbing them. And that has happened in every case where America interfered.
Yeah, it's a shame. If only they could go back to being isolationist, but as we said, when you're stuck in a rock and a hard place, you can't back down. And the same thing comes up in the Cold War with nuclear weapons and is coming up now with North Korea. Which, speaking of which, what do you think about North Korea?
Um, for North Korea, they're essentially dependent on China, and they do not have their own means of surviving unless they have trade with China. So if China completely cut them off, North Korea would be done in a day. But because China is funding them and allowing them to live on, it's creating a problem for America, and America wants to get involved in North Korea. There's actually nothing you can do. If you nuke the entire state of North Korea, millions of people dead. And if you like, so that is not an option. And if you attempt to invade North Korea, they just bomb South Korea or bomb any country in that area. So there's no real way to deal with North Korea directly. It is more of dealing with China, which will deal with North Korea if they please.
Yeah, it's just another situation of the Cold War, which I find here. Let me pause. Yeah, it's ridiculous that America thinks. Well, no, not necessarily America. That's not really what I think. It's ridiculous that the American populace thinks that this is like some unprecedented situation that we've never seen before. But if you remember, this has happened before. This has happened very recently, in fact. During the Cold War, we were at war with Russia for 40 years. We had nukes pointed at each other, and it was very tense. You would think that. Actually, I'm really surprised about this that a bunch of older generations aren't criticizing millennials for being so weak and being like, "Oh, I remember in my day when we had to watch videos about how you should hide under your desk in school because we were all afraid of dying," or I kept a machete under my bed during the Cuban Missile Crisis because I thought that the nuclear holocaust was upon us and we would have zombies running around the world. So I'm really surprised that hasn't been more present, but yeah, it's pretty ridiculous that everyone thinks this North Korea thing is like unprecedented and that we've never dealt with it before.
Yeah, it's just like dealing with it from the source. And like North Korea, the reason they're having talks with South Korea is it is very difficult for them to do well with little oil. So that's why they're kind of in talks with Korea, with South Korea right now,
Yeah,
with the whole Olympic thing.
yeah, and that's just so stupid that the U.S. is like, "Ooh, we're gonna boycott the Olympics." Seriously? Do you want to
Oh,
fix the
is that
problem or not?
actually something that is happening?
Yeah,
Is it?
like they're talking about doing that, and like it's the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
Yeah,
Like
it is quite absurd.
like you're
Like,
you're being
uh,
given like a hand and saying, "Hey, we're willing to talk," and you're like, "No, we're bigger than that."
yeah, and usually America would be in, like there would be an between North Korea and South Korea, but that did not happen, and that is really dangerous. Like, not dangerous; it's good because America is lose. They're on the decline. Like they are no longer the ones that are always present in the talks.
Yeah. You know, like they used to be the mediators, and you would always see countries come to them, and France for some reason, even though France always super biased to discuss their treaties, but you definitely don't see that anymore. I get that there's not that many wars to fight, but still.
Yeah, and that's the bad thing. Like, good and bad thing about nukes. Like, no one will ever go to war again with these nukes, which
Well, they better
creates
not.
really tense situations that have no solution. Like a war provides a solution. Like war is not good, but in the end of the day, somebody wins and the idea prevails. But there will be very tense situations in this world from now to eternity, just because if you um, do something to our country, we will nuke you.
Yeah. And like it's all just psychological warfare at this point. I would love for something to happen where like Trump and Kim Jong Un just come on like like a joint press conference or something. And they're like, "Hey, I get it. No, we don't. Neither of us really. Let's just shut the heck up with this, and we're not doing this." But they're not going to do that because like everybody has a stake in it, and like you get something out of brinkmanship, unfortunately, and it's a real shame. But yeah, nukes. They're probably for the best right now. At least everyone isn't sending their best young men off to war.
Yeah, like in like America knows they can do nothing with North Korea because if they do something, South Korea gets destroyed. Like,
Yeah,
and North Korea knows they can't do any offensive moves because they have no power in comparison to America. America has the capability to wipe them off the face of this earth with fire and fury.
yeah, immediately.
Yeah, so it is just a useless stalemate that is getting lots of attention.
And it seems like you can never get to a point where you're that desperate. I mean, the only situation I can think of is Hitler in like his bunker, being like, "Oh, I'm gonna shoot myself. Wait, I have this nuke button. Let me hit that real quick." And that's the only situation I can think of. But even then, I don't think they want to just ruin the world. Like they're not that egomaniacal. We think of politicians as these immoral people, but they're just stuck between the same rock and a hard place that countries are. They can either do this supposedly immoral thing and just survive politically and get rehired, or they can take the high ground, get fired, get criticized for it by their own people when their people are worse off, and then they are like, wait, why did I do that?
Mhm. Yeah, like all these people want to do is just keep their own uh, regime and power. Like Kim Jong Un, he doesn't want to do Kim Jong Un. He doesn't want to do anything other than stay in power. Like, and the nukes that he has is his only defense for him and his children, and to stay in power because they're like America wants to interfere. Yes, the conditions in Korea are awful, and people there are starving. But then again, um, if Korea, North Korea, were to compromise and get help from the world, they would have to give up their nukes, give up their position as like Kim would have to give up his power position, which does not want to happen.
Yeah, it's just not ideal either way. And that's really all that can be said on North Korea. What do
Yeah.
you think about the news?
News. I do not watch news anymore. Like all I do. Oh,
That
you
was just an
okay?
applause break.
Okay. Yeah. Wait, is it a pause break?
No, it's an applause break.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. So I do not watch the news. I listen to podcasts. It's because NPR is very, very unbiased. And all they talk about is objective, what is happening. And yeah, they talk about the actual problems. They do not talk about what Trump tweeted, like what this person said. No, they talk about this bill is being passed. This is happening between like Afghanistan and China, and it's very objective. And I feel 24-hour like cable news is disgusting, and I do not appreciate that everything that they do is for views.
You know what? I couldn't agree more. Like, I remember 2 years ago, and this was something I actually wrote about in my college comp paper because I thought it was a really interesting narrative for me. But I remember 2 years ago working on my freshman biology not sorry, sophomore biology project. I did basically the same project each year, so it always mixes up in my mind. But basically, the project was I was going in my garage and setting up some botany thing. By the way, botany projects are a nightmare to do. Stupid plants. But yeah, I did a project where hey, if you put really strong magnets at the bottom of at like the bottom of cups, are the roots more likely to grow deeper? It seemed pretty reasonable because apparently we magnetically treat seeds anyways. So hey, we're probably doing it so that the roots can grow farther down and grow better. I found some really interesting research on plants in space and how they would just grow in all directions because they didn't have anything like the nickel iron core in the middle of the earth to grow down towards. But that's neither here nor there. I'm talking about what I did around that. Uh, Basically, I love listening to podcasts as well, and I was listening to a podcast, Hello Internet, if you know it. It's by CGP Grey. He likes to talk about a lot of the philosophy and basically a lot of stuff I'm interested in, except for sports, because I'm that weird nerd that likes sports and a bunch of other nerdy things. But basically, I was listening to one of his Hello Internets, and he was talking about why he hates the news and why the news is completely worthless to listen to in any form. And I found it so compelling. His reasoning was that The news, how it functions, is it's supposed to grab your attention in the short term and to magnify issues that have little significance in the long run. And if you apply the test, that is, if you don't listen to the news, how much less do you know about the world? Now, I did this test. I didn't consume any news for like a week, and I realized, wait, hang on a second. Anything that matters to me, somebody is going to tell me about. My mom is going to be like, hey, what'd you think about, say, North Korea or something? Or, hey, what'd you think about this one example, actually, I believe Nathaniel was like, hey, what do you think about the London shooting or something? I didn't know about it, but now I know. So you always have an alternative way to be informed, and it's natural. And it only seems natural to not follow the news if you're going to find out about it anyways, and you're just going to you're going to waste your time and you're going to make yourself feel worse about it. If you listen to it, you'll be depressed and you'll be reliant on someone else to inform you. Well, no, that's actually the exact point. You're reliant on a corporation to inform you, a corporation that's very biased, as you said. They're being bought off, and they have people like Rupert Murdoch for Fox News funding a lot of their ventures. He's obviously pretty politically involved. And then you have just everyone being in an earpiece, and everyone has a stake in telling you the news one specific way. Who wants to live in a biased way? So you should always be trying to get your news from a very closed source of people that you trust because they don't have any stake.
Like, I know that 100%. If Donald Trump was not on the news 24/7, like he was objectively interesting. Like he was so uncanny that people wanted to see what's happening. So the media covered it, and they gave him so much attention. Like I think by the end of his campaign, it was just like billions of dollars worth of time, like millions of dollars worth of time that he was just aired on news just because he it gets views.
Yeah.
And in the end of the day, like sure, CNN is liberal. They love to have Trump just because they have something to talk about and something to get views.
Yeah, you're either bashing him or praising him. You're never telling the facts.
Yeah, and I also hate how it's so um, partisan. Like people say they watch both Fox News and because it helps them get a grasp on what's really happening. But none of those people really know what's happening.
Yeah.
They just say an extreme viewpoint that is is like flawed in a way. And like New York Times or NPR is just so unbiased and objective. Okay, NPR does not like Trump, and not NPR. New York Times does not like Trump, and people say that's a liberal bias, but it is not hard to hate Trump.
Yeah.
So, just listening to essentially unbiased sources is the best bet rather than following cable news. It's because I am disgusted by cable news.
Yeah. My only problem with the New York Times is they're very involved politically, and they most of the time, if they have a controversial subject, they're going to screen it by politicians, which I don't really like, but they do a pretty good job. But the big website that I like to follow is 538. They have a big focus on giving statistical viewpoints instead of political ones, and that's very helpful because you can't. I mean, you can be biased with numbers, sure, but it's a lot more difficult to do that than be biased with opinions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Like I'd just rather have like something that's objectively happening than somebody's opinion that really has no significance. Like their opinion, it just polarizes things, rather than like hearing something objective.
Yeah, definitely. And NPR does an amazing job of it. I think there's something to be said for following the lower middle class of entertainment because they're trying. No, forget that point. That was stupid. Forget. There is a point to following people that don't have a stake in the venture. Like if for something like NPR, it's so old, it's older than all of this mainstream news. They don't have any reason to like they already, and their reputation is that they're for the facts, and they're just going to give you the facts. When you have to fill that reputation, they're not going to try and branch out and be like, "Ooh, let's start a partisan news show where we're going to entertain people." They're just going to stick with the facts and make a bunch of other delightful podcasts.
Yeah, and like I remember there's like a huge Twitter scandal, and I didn't hear about it, and like people thought I was uninformed for not hearing about it, but it's just something stupid he says on Twitter.
Yeah.
Why is that relevant to things that are actually happening?
Yeah, and that goes back to the test. If you aren't if they're not talking about it in a month, a year later, 10 years later, did it matter? No. So why do you need to hear about it now?
Yeah, and like there's so many things happening right now that it is hard to follow. I cannot blame people for not following politics. Everything is partisan. Everything like people are not working together, politicians anymore. And like people are dissuaded from politics because just everything is going on and nothing is being done to fix it because it's impossible to fix all these problems if people can get lost.
Yeah, because everyone has a stake in keeping the problems. And no, like that just comes down to like problems in politics right now with like gerrymandering and yeah, specifically gerrymandering because with gerrymandering the problem is when you don't have competitive elections, you're just going to sit in there and just keep doing your thing and just keep being partisan and making the 90% of people in your district happy. When you don't, when you're not threatened, you don't have any reason to make yourself better, so they just get worse and worse, and then suddenly they're hit with like a sexual assault scandal or something like Al Franken, and then they get thrown out maybe, or they don't.
Yeah, like for gerrymandering, I'm hearing something a while back about a congressional seat in Virginia, and over 55% of the population had voted Democrat, but because there was a Republican in power at the time, the ones that map out the congressional districts, the Republican won,
Yeah.
even though Democrats had 55% of the vote. So that is clearly unfair, but that's what the system is.
Yeah.
And it is unfortunate. And that is why I don't necessarily agree with the Electoral College. It's because I do not care for the Midwest. If anyone like has a passionate hatred for the Midwest, it would be me. Just because it's so irrelevant. And they get so much representation that they should not be getting.
So you're more of a fan of the House of Representatives then?
Yes, I'm more of a fan of House of because like if you group up the entire Midwest into one big state, like they're not going to be different. They're going to all agree on the same ideas, and they get far more representation than they should.
Yeah, it's an interesting debate. I think it works pretty well right now because it's such a philosophical thing. You just got to split them up and say, okay, we'll have one that makes these people happy, and we'll have another that makes these people happy. It's the same issue in baseball with the DH versus no DH. I'm not going to expect you to have any say on that, but just with a historical argument versus a more modern one. Neither
Oh,
is
designated hitter. That's what it took me a while.
yeah.
Think of what that was.
But like it seems like a pretty good system is always just to say, okay, we'll incorporate both, and even though it's a compromise, sorry, that's how it works. You should try and fix your own problems if you don't like it.
Yeah, but the current electoral college is highly in favor of the Republicans just because of all those Midwestern countries. But then again, like it's not that much in favor. It's because in the end of the day, the popular vote and is about even every election.
Amazingly.
So, yeah, so it's not going to be unfair to just take that system away. Like they will have less congressional representation, and rightfully so. It's why does their opinion matter?
Yeah.
It's because they're all the same. But in the end of the day, they will have it will be even. Like if it was all up to popular vote.
Yeah, I'm not passionate about much of politics just because most of it is so apathetic. Like, you can argue about it all you want and nothing's going to change. But the one thing I am passionate about is getting rid of first past the post. Because I think it is such a horrible system for politics that it causes a lot of the problems that we have in American politics. And almost every problem that people have with politics can be pointed to first past the post. So
What is first past the post?
I'm glad you asked. So first past the post is the system of electing people by having turning any race into a two-person horse race, or not even a two-person horse race. Just whoever gets the most votes wins. So that sounds like a good system, but the problem is it creates strategic voting, and strategic voting is a terrible thing. It leads to people choosing the politician that they think will hurt them the least instead of the one that they think will help them the most. So basically, and there's arguments for why you should do like a ranked choice system where, oh, if the politician that you chose first loses, then all of your votes should go to the person that you want to next most win. And that kind of system creates you voting for the person that you like the most, and then you vote for the person that obviously could help you the most. So that leads to people actually voting for people that they like, and it leads to them actually becoming politically involved because they feel like that their vote actually matters. That if they want to vote for a third party, oh look, I'm not wasting my vote. Like the idea of wasting your vote, that's horrible. Like to think that you have to vote for somebody just because no, you're going to lose and you'll be screwing yourself over. That's a prisoner's dilemma, and you can't create a prisoner's dilemma in politics. Because then what happens is you have situations like North Korea. You have situations where you have to be globalist or you're going to lose your empire. You can't do it. And the prisoner's dilemma just has to be avoided at all costs. And I think that following a system where most other countries have followed, namely Australia, because I think Australia does politics amazingly, but just something like any alternative vote would be better than first past the post.
Yeah, like there are so many viable, and they do not get a say in anything because they do not have the funding that the DNC and Republicans have, and I think it's unfair that they do not get a say because they provide valid solutions to broken problems, but they will never win. So, like Gary Johnson wasn't the best candidate,
No.
but people would rather vote for Gary Johnson than to vote for either of the two.
Yeah.
But
they couldn't.
many people would rather not have Hillary or not have Trump. Therefore, they just didn't vote for Gary Johnson because they feel like they're just throwing away their vote, which essentially they are. Like
in the first past the post system, yeah.
Yeah, like voting for no one would be equivalent to voting for a third party because you're just doing nothing. Yeah, and like that's why I believe that the system that you said, that favors who you like the most, that would be very beneficial because like that allows for new ideas to be implemented without penalizing the voter.
Yeah, and if anyone didn't really get a good understanding of what I mean by alternative vote, just go to CGP Gray's YouTube channel and look at his videos on the alternative vote. They completely changed my mind on the issues with first past the post, and they really gave me an idea of how it works with brilliant examples from the animal kingdom and just how an election would look under it. And like it's completely persuaded me to think that the first past the post is the bane of any electoral system and that America's insane not to fix it. Like the only people that would be in favor of it is the DNC chair and the RNC chair. That's it. Those are the only two people that would like that system because it creates a basically 50-50 vote every year, and it makes sure that they are always relevant despite what the American populace thinks. So if you have a system like, say, single transferable vote, where you just rank all the politicians that you want to, and then your vote just transfers to the next guy if the first guy loses, then you have politicians that are accountable to the people because they're voting for the people that they agree with most instead of the people that they think will hurt them the least. And just doing that, that fixes a lot of problems that you have in politics. Just right there. You get rid of problems like gerrymandering, you get rid of problems with incumbency, and it would really help, I think.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, you
Uh,
were gonna
uh,
say?
oh no, you are good to continue.
Oh, okay. So I was gonna transition to talking about what not politics. I've had enough of politics. What podcasts you are really in favor for NPR? Like I know for me, I have really fond memories of listening to podcasts like Freakonomics and Serial with my dad in the car, and that really got me into politics in like ninth grade. What podcasts do you listen to?
So I have a daily routine. I listen to NPR's The Daily, which is a about 12-minute podcast that just sums up what happened over the past day or what's currently happening, and it's just a summarized version of the news you need to know. And if I feel as if I didn't get enough information on a topic, I will listen to the New York Times The Daily, which is about a 25-minute podcast, and that is it's I don't favor it to NPR. Like NPR is far better, but that is another option I have that gives good news. And when I come home, I listen to This American Life, which is just an hour-long podcast about just any topic that it just says like three different stories relating to the same topic, and it's really just it's fun to listen to. It's informative, but like it's fun and
Yeah, I can understand that. Did you ever listen to Serial? Because I know that was like a big cult classic in 2015.
I have not. I should give it. What is?
Well, I don't know if you should necessarily give it a listen. It's not that great, but it was just really popular. It was I believe Sarah Koenig, who used to work for NPR, and like she branched out and made her own podcast, and it had to do with wrongly convicted criminals in the U.S. court system, specifically dealing with Anan Syed. It was like some like how would I describe him? He was a Baltimore high schooler who was convicted of manslaughter of his girlfriend, and there was a big case for why it wasn't him. And Sarah Koenig decided she would make a 12 episode podcast out of the case against him, and she got really influential, and she eventually got him a retrial. I believe it failed because she apparently left out a bunch of information about the case, but yeah, like it was a really interesting podcast, and it piqued people's interest on obviously judicial systems in the same way that the news coverage of the O.J. Simpson trial and stuff like that. What was her name? The woman that killed her kid or whatever it is. I wouldn't expect you to know, but yeah, that one. You know, the mom that killed her kid and
Yeah.
whatever her name is. She doesn't really deserve a name drop, anyways. But it was a really interesting podcast, and it had a really good theme song, and that's enough to get a lot of people interested in it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and another interesting podcast, the new. It is a New York Times series, and it talks like it is just about. I think I'm not sure how long. It's either like 30 minutes, 45 minutes about a specific politician, and it just goes in depth about them, their history, and it is currently on hiatus. It's like a short series,
Oh,
but it gives information on all politics, like all like politicians you don't hear about, but are quite influential, like the Speaker of the House, like
does it just do like
and
all 538 members of Congress?
no, like it does like it gets like into like a lot of members of Congress, but they did not have the time or ability to do all those, so they just did the few important members, and they have like people like Sean Hannity, which is a Fox News, like, and like he is quite influential in politics, like because he has close ties with the president, and he controls basically the conservative, like he controls a lot of the right because he is very influential with the Republican platform.
Oh, okay. I mean that makes a lot of sense. Uh, let's see. Did you ever listen to Freakonomics?
I did not. That seems to be something you like, and I will add that right now
Oh
to
no,
my
I haven't
list.
listened to it in like 2 years. And that was just something that my dad used to play for me, and it had to do with like a lot of the weird economics and things, and talking about I don't even remember anymore, but it was just weird politics and economics and like how you can make anything into an economic situation, and that's interesting because I love injecting math into anything.
Mhm. Yeah, I just got into podcasts recently about like at the beginning of this school year,
Oh wow,
and
that's pretty
it's
recent.
been, yeah, it's been really helpful because I liked, like I liked listening to like Stephen Colbert and whatnot for like a while back, but I just like I knew it wasn't news, but I just kind of like grew tired because all it was is talking about is Trump and
Yeah.
he's bad, and like yes, it gives me interesting stuff, but like it's so relevant.
Yeah, and there's something really empowering in getting your entertainment by your own volition and choosing something and saying, okay, if I don't like this, I can turn this off. I don't have to go back to this TV channel and just say, oh, I wonder what's on today. No, you have to push a button on your phone, you have to keep it going, and then, yeah, you get really invested in it because you feel like you had a real stake in it playing. So
Yeah.
I've been involved in politics. Dang it, I keep doing that. Enough about the damn politics. I've been involved in podcasts for a little longer, like 2 years or so, and really the ones that I found the most influential for me have been CGP Gray's podcasts, Hello Internet and Cortex. Like those are just amazing because I think he's an amazing person. He's probably the biggest role model in my life, so that's that's a pretty good sale for him. And then I just listen to a couple MMA podcasts because I like to stay in the loop on that, and then like a baseball podcast here and there.
Is it like the actual like commentators of the game, or is it like just a rundown of what happened in baseball over the past week?
Uh, I, 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 I actually listened to Joe Rogan's podcast, who's a commentator for the UFC. But yeah, most of it's just getting the rundown and like, oh, what happened, because I don't really have the time to watch any sporting events. And like that's just how I stay informed and know more about than Bailey about basketball and football. But yeah, I just find those sports interesting because they're nihilistic and oh, if you lose, you might lose your job, and there's a lot of high stakes.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. I guess personal questions would come in now. Let's see. What's the worst injury or illness you've ever had?
Um, I don't haven't really had any injuries. Like I've been fortunate enough to be healthy my entire life. Oh, like one time I was playing goalkeeper and I got kicked in the head and I got
Oh, Jesus.
yeah, I got knocked out for like a minute.
Ooh,
That's probably the worst injury. It wasn't a lasting injury. It was just a temporarily I'm knocked out for the time being type situation.
yeah, I almost kicked Josh Lax in the head when I was playing him in soccer.
Oh,
Yeah,
that sounds fun.
yeah, I love to bring that up sometimes, but the worst I've probably had was in a lacrosse game, which I don't know why my parents thought that I would be a good person to play lacrosse, and like I'm a pretty wiry person, so like I don't really have the bulk to withstand a check. So of course, on the first game that I played, the first time that I got a concussion.
Oh my god.
So yeah,
That
that was fun. Of course, the guy got a yellow card, but what does that mean? But yeah, being
yeah.
getting a concussion's the worst. Like you can't do anything for like a week. You can't even read. You just gotta sit there like
Oh
an
my.
idiot. And luckily, I got into not politics, podcasts around the time. So yeah. Wait, no, I didn't. I got my timeline completely wrong. I was listening to audiobooks at that time.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Do you listen to audiobooks at all?
I do not. I unfortunately stay away from reading or books, which is a awful habit, and that really reflects on like how awful my reading comprehension is. But I do not stay and like read books, which
Hey,
is unfortunate.
hey, don't worry about it. Everyone stays away from books nowadays. Even I do. Like I've listened to like one audiobook in my life, and it was really good. And I'm surprised I haven't listened to more. But it's such a time investment. Like when you can listen to like a 10-minute podcast and get the same out of like an 8-hour audiobook, it's pretty hard to get the motivation to do it.
Yeah, and I heard if you don't develop the reading skills by the age of 8 or 10, you can't really develop it that well.
Oh, huh.
So yeah, like I never read much books as a kid, and I don't read much books now. I can read and understand, but it just takes a while, and I don't have much hope in improving reading skills because books are just so uninteresting. And
Especially not
I
on the
want.
SAT.
Oh yeah, yeah. That the SAT was not a good time for English.
Yeah, luckily they'll separate them pretty well and look at your SAT math. But you know,
Yeah,
let's see.
but just and like another thing is just like so many people are moving away from books, and this upcoming generation, like they're on iPads instead of looking at like maybe a children's book. It's that just like voids the skills you need, basic skills to improve.
Does it?
Like I'd assume so because instead of reading, you're just playing games.
Oh, I thought you meant just reading an ebook voids your reading skills.
Oh no no
Okay,
no.
yeah, I got you. Let's see. And luckily, my sister's pretty good about reading amazingly, so I'm pretty happy with that. She's like 7 years younger than me, but yeah, most people are not. What's your least favorite social situation?
Social situation. What do you mean by a so?
Just like any situation in public that you could be like involved in that like you hate being involved in. Like I don't know, going to get a haircut or getting asked like an embarrassing question.
Oh, I just hate like I'm kind of quiet in like in social situations with people that I do not know. So I and like so I kind of being hate being placed in a situation where everybody else knows each other and I do not know everybody. So I'm going to end up being quiet rather than socialize, just because they're all talking about their own things that they know, and I have no input because I am not. This is the first time interacting with them.
Yeah, that's the worst. I usually just remove myself from those situations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The like college is going to be because I do not have many interests, and the way you get to talk to people is talking about interests, and is something I lack.
Yeah. And like I kind of have the opposite problem. I'm pretty good at talking about interests, but I don't have the either the motivation or the social skill to get to that point where I can actually talk about them.
Yeah.
My least favorite would probably have to be going to stupid auditorium meetings because those are a nightmare to try and figure out who you're gonna sit with, and then like whenever you do, it's super awkward because like, hey, can I just squeeze in here? And then like you don't say anything the entire time, and it's just not fun.
Yeah, just know that if that ever happens, there is a spot right beside me with your name on it.
Yeah, that's the worst part too. Like, you can't even find people that you would be fine with. Because like there's like 500 people there, and you're like, oh God, where is he?
Yeah,
But yeah, I really
yeah,
appreciate that.
yeah. I do like I do like auditorium situations just because you get out of class and you talk to your friends, you goof around. I notice my group of friends tend to goof around a lot in every single class, and we're always the people that others listen on to their conversation.
Oh, that can be interesting.
Yeah, yeah, it is quite interesting.
If we cure death, do you think you would accept that cure?
If we cure what?
Cure death.
Death. Like, um, I don't believe I have the problem of deafness. So, oh, death, death. Oh,
I would
okay,
disagree.
okay. Yeah. So, death, I would not, just because like life is just repetitive. There isn't much to it. Like, what is it? It's just the same thing over and over. You are a kid, you go to school every day in and out. You grow older, you go to work, and like you find love, you don't, whatever. But like there isn't much to it after that. Like the only purpose a person has essentially is to reproduce, and after that, they're null and void and useless. Like no one will ever be remembered or ever be important.
Oh,
Like in 10,000 years, humanity is going to live on, but barely anyone's going to know of Einstein.
oh,
He's just going to be another person.
thank you, Kafka. He's like a big nihilistic writer.
Oh yeah, I'm quite nihilistic because like I do not believe in an afterlife. Therefore, I just I do not think there's much to life after.
Yeah,
Like yeah, so
yeah, it's a pretty freeing philosophy.
yeah, like do the most you can within the time you're here, and try to make life as enjoyable for yourself as you can.
Yeah. Do you take it in a religious route, or is it just a philosophical route?
Well, I believe like I do not believe in the concept of God, so therefore it's tied with that, but it's philosophical as well, just because there's like it's a combination of both. One kind of comes with the other.
Yeah. It seems like that's a big trend with people. I'm not going to say that actually. I was about to say that's a big trend of people that are smarter, but that is that's very inflammatory.
It is kind of true though.
It is kind of true, but people don't
Like
like to
all
hear
of
that.
my like um, aunts and uncles, they're very well educated, and none of them
Yeah,
believe in that concept.
exactly. I do wonder if it's like a bell curve where like if you get to some certain intelligence, you no longer believe in God and like whatever. But if you get past that bell curve, you suddenly become more spiritual, but not like into organized religion because obviously all of that's just BS.
Mm-hmm. Like originally, I like I began to create a distaste for organized religion just because there's so many problems that arise from it, and then that just made me think like the idea of God that organized religions preach, and why believe that like when like everything that you see is tangible and that is not. So that's how I got dissuaded from it. But I realized like people and the people that tend to believe religion, like it is very strong in the South, and then again the South is very uneducated.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, but like I realized like where we are, like the Math and Science Center, there are many that do not believe, just because math and science.
Yeah, Yeah, and it seems like the people that still do hang on to that are just people that separate the two in a way that a physicist still believes in God. They just say, okay, this thing is in one place, and this other thing is in another place, and these two do not coexist.
Yeah, like I was listening to a podcast about Fermi's paradox,
Ooh,
and
yeah,
they they asked uh, this guy asked his physicist, how many physicists do you know that believe in God? And instantly, like she was a professor, so she knew many physicists, but instantly off the top of her head, she said four, just because there aren't many
yeah.
that.
It's so difficult to separate the two, and like it's just a question of okay, why am I even bothering to do this if I don't agree with it?
And in the end of the day, if there is a God, like if you are a good person,
Yeah,
you will not be punished for not believing. And like so long as you're a genuinely good person, and that is my take on the issue, is because I don't believe people would be punished just because they don't believe if they're a saint, and I don't believe that like people who believe and are awful people will be rewarded.
yeah, exactly. I mean, like, what kind of God is the God that would punish you for eternity for eating a crawfish on Sunday or whatever? Right?
I
Like, what kind of
remember
God?
there was a minister that got water because he disputed the Bible. Like he was a famous like minister. I think that's what it's called, minister. But
Probably.
then he got hated by all of America because he disputed the Bible, just because he didn't believe that people should be punished, and he created his own kind of sect, Christianity, that didn't wasn't based off of the Bible.
Yeah, it's a real shame that America's become so involved with Christianity because there's a lot of better religions. Like if you just look at some other organized religions like Islam, Islam's an amazing religion at its heart. Because if you just look at its five tenets, let me pull these up real quick. The five tenets of Islam, and it's a real big shame that the West likes to bash Islam because it really is a beautiful religion. Yeah, tenet one: never dishonor the night mother. Forget it. I'm not going to be able to parse any of these. So, like, my impression of the tenets is like you should always educate yourself. You should always be informed in that sense. You should always be loyal to your family. You should always be looking to make the world a better place. Like, those are beautiful concepts.
Yeah,
And like, if you compare that to something like Christianity, where the big tenet is, oh, you should always do in service of God. Are you
yeah,
encouraging slavery?
yeah, and also like that, like people misunderstand, like I or like understand it too well. The concept of like homophobia like arises from the Bible, and that like just simply hating another person because of how they are is absurd.
Yeah.
And like if any organized religion promotes hate, that is null and voiding the purpose of the religion, because religions were intended to create harmony, and it clearly hasn't done that.
Yeah, and just to organize people. That's what it was for a lot of the Middle Ages. It was just a place where you could go on Sunday where you happened to bathe and you could actually meet some of the people in your community. And unfortunately, it's become a bit perverted nowadays, which I think is a great word for it, actually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Let's So you said you were listening to a podcast about the Fermi's paradox. What did you think about the Fermi's paradox?
I want to believe in aliens, and like this universe is infinite, and there needs to be life like beyond us. Like there's no way that there is not life beyond the like what we are on the earth, but we have not really seen any evidence of it, which is unfortunate. But then again, this universe is huge, and we have not expanded any of it whatsoever.
Yeah, that's essentially my perspective. Aside from the universe being infinite, I just think that's a misnomer because the universe is infinite over the course of time. But if we hit the pause button and we looked at the universe, we would be able to drive to the end point of the universe. It's just the fact that it's always expanding that makes it infinite over time. But yeah, absolutely, there has to be life out there. It's absolutely insane to think that there isn't. And I think that the fact that we haven't seen any life, it probably points to the fact that the constant of light is always going to hold true. I know in experimental physics, they're not experimental physics, what theoretical physics, and they're always trying to be like, oh wait, we can break the light barrier if we just make a wormhole, or oh if we have these neutrinos that somehow go like a couple milliseconds faster, that was incorrect, or they're always looking for ways to invalidate the laws that we have right now. But the fact
Like,
remains,
when are humans or aliens ever that? Like, it will take years for, not years, millions of years for us to figure out how to tame wormholes, if that is even possible.
yeah, I mean the math just works out without it. So based on Occam's razor, why do you need to find a way that it doesn't work? Like you're just wasting your time.
Yeah, and like I do believe in alien life, but this universe is just far too huge for it to ever interact with each other.
Exactly.
And there is a theory that life itself, uh, at a certain point, like it advances and advances, and at a certain point, every civilization gets so advanced that they destroy themselves, and then that is the fate of every civilization.
That's
Which is
exactly
really
my
interesting.
perspective, actually. Like
Yeah,
I view evolution as like a circle instead of the linear path. So yeah, I'm assuming this just could be repeating what you already know. But for those who don't know, how I see it is, it starts off with like a one minuscule event, and maybe you get like a couple cyanobacteria or something on Earth. Obviously, you can have like a non-carbon based life forms on other planets, as we found. I think silicon was one, but
yeah, silicon.
yeah, but you get one little minuscule thing that develops over time based on natural selection, which is a beautiful thing. It eventually becomes a mammal, or at least in our case it does. Then it develops into something that can start taming the rest of the animals. Then suddenly you have the perfect tamer. It can use all the animals to destroy all the other animals for its own use. And then eventually it exhausts all the other animals, and with nothing left for it, it falls apart, and then it goes back to the beginning. Like that doesn't seem unrealistic.
Yeah, and like global warming, for example, people are just so ignorant because they're denying global warming, but that is impacting crops, impacting our food source, and like that is man-made.
Yeah,
The problem, and people like in 100 years, what are we going to do about it? Like in 100 years, I doubt we'll still be using like petrol and oil and whatever.
yeah,
But like I heard it, interestingly enough, in 4040, Toyota and Honda are stopping making um, combustion engines with uh, diesel oil.
yeah. Well, they don't have much of a reason to at that point with how much electric has been proceeding. Tesla's been doing a great job with that, but obviously, if you're just getting the electric energy from fossil fuels, that's not helping much.
Yeah, like I feel like 40 late, but like it still is huge progress for them to say that. Like I remember reading an article in Germany. Um, they wanted to cut their fossil fuel emission to 40% less than it was in 1940. And not 1940, 19, and they did that by 32%, which is really amazing considering how they are moving away from fossil fuels and moving towards other sources of energy.
Yeah, and that they're actually trying to meet those goals instead of just saying, "Oh, we're going to join the Paris peace talks," and not the Paris peace talks, like whatever those talks were in Paris about global warming, and oh yeah, we'll definitely keep it within 2 degrees Celsius, and like no country actually follows that, and they're like, "Oh, we'll deal with that in 50 years." It's like
Yeah,
that's my
there's no way to enforce the Paris, whatever the Paris thing.
yeah,
There's no way to enforce it, therefore it is useless. Like America drops out, no repercussions, and just because like oil companies are in charge, and like if we use nuclear energy, we would be set because nuclear waste is so small that it's irrelevant. And we developed bunkers in Nevada to store nuclear waste, but we just don't make any nuclear reactors, which is a shame.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you about the nuclear debate because another thing with Germany was they pledged, I don't know what the date was, they pledged to completely eliminate their reliance on nuclear energy after the Fukushima Daiichi disaster in 2011. And that's obviously one perspective, and I majorly respect the German people. Like, they really know their stuff, and like they're a fantastic country, but that's one perspective on it, and it seems like you disagree with that perspective. So you think that nuclear energy's benefits outweigh its costs?
I definitely like the waste, and if people are careful and know what they're doing, nuclear energy is such a reliable source of energy, and it has no environmental impact. Like yeah, like essentially no environmental impact, and it is very reliable. And just because they have been given a bad rep, they are like people don't make them anymore, which is a shame because we're still burning coal in a lot of America, and we're still burning natural gas, and natural gas is so much better than coal, but it's not good whatsoever for the.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to put a number to that, about 2,000 to 2,300 metric tons of fuel are generated per year. But if you look at it, like how much space does that really take up? You can have places like just a Russian mountain where you store all of it. Okay, so you've made that mountain uninhabitable, but that's a worthy cost. And I mean, it's just worth it because let's say you have one nuclear disaster every like 30 years. That's something you can handle versus the constant disaster of fossil fuels.
Yeah, and like this whole like so many animals are dying, like so many I heard that like sea turtles they their sex is determined by the temperature of the water,
Uh-oh.
and the warmer the water, the more likely they are to be female. And it's like a 99% female ratio now
Ah,
to one
jeez.
male.
That's not good.
And yeah, like crops cannot grow. Like I know, like I heard olives in Italy cannot grow. No, olives in Spain cannot grow. Grapes in Italy and like barley cannot grow in America, and like it's ruining this world. Like global warming, but people are not doing anything about it.
Yeah, it seems like we're just going to. Well, I don't know. It seems like what if we produced something like nuclear fusion? Do you think that we'd be willing to switch to that?
Nuclear fusion, like just anything nuclear just has quite a bad rep. Just like even name nuclear itself has bad like has such a negative connotation. So and like I feel like fusion. So on what exactly is fusion?
It's just the reverse process. In a fission, obviously, you're dividing the atom. In a fusion, you're doing what the sun does and fusing the two atoms to make a helium atom from two hydrogens. The problem is we don't have a way of making that energy efficient right now. We can do it like a couple times, but it uses up way more energy than it produces right now.
Oh, well, if that ever works out and have the same danger as nuclear fission, then I believe that would be a something we should look forward to. But I like geothermal solar energy is very reliable. People give the excuse of what if clouds happen, but
Yeah.
but if you just cover all the uh, like all the desert areas of America with solar panel, like just a small area of it with solar panels, our whole country would be good.
Or
And I
heck,
heard
just all
that
the roofs of cities.
yeah, and Nikola Tesla, he created a plan that can um, provide essentially free electricity for everybody. But then electricity companies hated Nikola Tesla and killed him, essentially.
Well, first of all, Nikola Tesla died like on his own just from like getting old, but yeah, he lived to like the 1950s or something. But actually, now I gotta fact check that because I'm gonna feel really bad about it. But he definitely didn't get assassinated. Nikola Tesla. When did you die, Nikola Tesla? You crazy crazy person. Yeah, he lived to be like 87. So
Oh,
I'm sure that was like some other guy that got assassinated. They're certainly happy to kill people off, but
yeah.
my problem with Tesla was he was a genius for like 50 years. But then I feel like he just lost his mind and like created ideas like what you're talking about. Because like the free energy for everybody that had to do with using the vibration of the world to charge things like that. I Maybe someday we can harness that, but there's no way Nikola Tesla was prepared in the 1910s to harness that energy. I don't care how smart he was. In a time when you just created electricity, you're going to suddenly harness something that even today we don't have a grasp on, and we've done research on it. We still don't have a grasp on it.
Yeah.
Like you
I,
can
I
say it was
have
ahead of its time,
respect
but
for Nikola. Like, he seemed to be an interesting man, and the fact that he lost his mind makes it better, just because he thinks outside of the box where like no one else could even think of thinking.
yeah, and like creating stuff like alternative current, obviously that's an incredible invention. And yeah, he was always facing public pressure from people like Edison, and yeah, he was a big controversial figure. And it seems like there's a big trend with people today to really respect Nikola Tesla. I'm not really sure where that came from, but yeah, he's a good guy. Certainly better than people like Freud.
Well, what is your thing with Freud
Oh,
here?
I hate Freud. I think he's a moron. I like psychology. I do. Like I like the sociological aspects of like looking at something like, oh, the Stanford prison study. That's interesting because you get an idea of, okay, how do people work in crowds? How do people try and take control of situations? That's interesting. But when you try and you can rationalize the subconscious all you want. Like that's what this podcast is named after. But when you try and do something and make a comment about the unconscious and be like, oh, it's just the tip of the iceberg that we can control, and the rest of it divides into the ego, the superego, and the whatever the heck else he was talking about. That doesn't make any sense. Like if you look at the ego, his arguments about it, I don't have it off the top of my head, but a lot of what he said was invalidated, and he would talk about like the Oedipus complex as if that is like the crucial thing that controls a lot of people's interactions, and how like something about like gay people being like the bane of existence or something, and like a lot of his ideas were nuts and like
But I always respect people who do those claims,
oh yeah,
because
yeah, definitely,
yes, they can be like, those claims can be refuted and they're 100% wrong,
certainly.
but they created new viewpoints, and that is just like outside the box thinking that I respect, because like, you can be wrong and people refute you, but like, nobody thinks like that, and so if you do make a breakthrough, that is amazing.
Oh, absolutely. And my only problem with it is it is held as the gospel in subjects like AP psychology, and like you'll have a bunch of questions on it, and like the AP tests so teachers have to teach you, and I'm like, okay, why are we learning this BS? And like that's pretty much why I didn't take the class, because I knew I was going to waste like an entire quarter learning about some raving lunatic, which I say in the most positive light. So yeah, that's my problem with Freud. Let's see. What can I ask you about that's personal? What do you think about meditating?
I believe it is very, very useful. I do not do it. I should, but it helps. It helps your brain function much better. It clears your mind and allows you to think much better. Like, just having the ability to just think is really nice, and improving on that with meditation is proven to be true time after time.
Oh yeah. Do you get anxiety at all?
I do not. Like, I can't get anxious about like something like a test, but I do not.
Well, that's
But I
great.
heard
I
it.
don't either.
Huh?
That's great. I don't either.
Yeah, like I heard meditation can be great for anxiety because you just clear out your mind and you lose, like, you do not focus on the bad aspects of life for that
Yeah.
time being, that you're just thinking about your breathing.
Yeah, it seems like the feedback loop that comes with anxiety is just such a horrible thing for being mindful. Like, if you're just constantly thinking about something and then like you're either not doing it or even after you did it, you're still worrying about it in like an OCD way. That's really harmful for anything that you're doing in the present. And I think there's a good case to make for just being meditative in like your daily life and just when I don't know, say you're recording a podcast, just having your mind completely clear, you have nothing going on, you're just completely in the moment, and it's just a serene feeling. You don't feel like, oh shoot, am I going to do something? Oh no, what's going on? Oh, I'm nervous. I'm talking to thousands of people. No, don't worry about it. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, like it is very like I could not imagine living with anxiety. Like I overthink stuff a lot, but like worrying about those things that I overthink would just be detrimental.
Yeah. Let's see what we got next. Hmm. Alright, what the heck? My Chromebook turned off. Oh well. Uh, Now, how would you rank the six flavors of food? And like by that I mean sweet, savory, that being umami, salty, uh, crap, what's the other one? Spicy and bitter.
Well, I like sweets like are actually addictive.
Yeah,
Therefore, I adore them. Like you have like a little rush every time you have. So I would say sweet is the best, and then salty, and then savory, and then spicy. I love spicy. Bitter, and then that's five. What's the last one?
the last one was sour.
I like sour better than bitter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like I do like the spicy stuff a lot. It's like not for the sake of like liking the spice itself, but just being able to have the spice is really nice. Like I remember having like the hottest wing from Buffalo Wild Wings and getting a free T-shirt for it, which not many people can do.
Yeah, for me, I would probably have to go salty, then what would I go with? Probably savory, then I would imagine. No, I would go spicy after salty, then savory, then probably bitter, then sweet, and then sour. I'm not really that big of a fan of sweets. I'm much more into salt.
That is that is very weird. Like I've never met a person that was not a big fan of sweets,
Oh,
given that it
really?
is objectively addictive.
I thought it was like a 50-50 thing for guys, and then like for most women, it was like 90%, which is obviously a massive generalization, but you know.
Yeah,
Huh, that's interesting.
yeah.
I
I
don't.
never knew that people like that. It was like different for men and women. That's really interesting. But yeah, I do respect the salt. Potato chips are where it's at.
Yeah, I'm really happy with myself actually because I had a horrible problem with snacking for like most of my life, and then like right before I was going, actually this goes into a really interesting story. So last year, I don't know if I've told you about this, but I did a pre-college program at Stevens College, which is just in Hoboken, New Jersey, and I had to go away from my family for 2 weeks, and obviously that's something I've not obviously that's something I've never done. The longest I've been away for previously was like 2 years for a school trip up in Maryland, which was an amazing trip, by the way. But at this pre-college program, I knew I'd be away for 2 weeks, so I wasn't going to be able to snack there. So I was like, hey, this is the perfect opportunity to finally kick this terrible habit. I'm not going to eat 4 packs of Ritz crackers a day, which is insane. Like, you will give yourself a heart attack. Don't try it. But Yeah, like I realized that was a big opportunity for me, so I didn't eat anything from the start of summer break to then. And then when I got back, I still had the cravings, obviously, but I just said, hey, I got a streak now. I got to keep the streak going. And I actually haven't done it since, and it's kind of amazing.
Wow, that is impressive.
Yeah, and like the big thing for me is I'm a very, like being a completionist, I'm a very streak oriented person. And if I can just start a streak with something, I'm going to want to keep it up at like all costs.
Yeah, that is good. Like, but if you break, how you handle the situation after that is quite important as well.
Oh yeah, like if I just like one day chose to like have something, have like a snack or something, I would feel broken inside. Which
And
sounds
then,
super dramatic, but I mean, like when you're like part of like what you're living your life for is just it disappears all of a sudden. That's really hard to deal with.
mhm, yeah, like now that you proved the snack thing, just might as well have a snack because that is quite impressive. Snacks are the best.
Yeah, they are. Let's see. Do you classify grainy foods as sweets? Like, would you classify like having some pasta as like being a sweets?
I would not. I'll just classify sugary stuff as sweets, even though carbs are kind of like aren't don't carbs turn into glucose?
Yeah, yeah, at least structurally.
Yeah, but I would not classify those just because whatever you taste on your taste bud, what would I classify them?
Yeah. What's
Wait,
the
where's the argument coming from that pasta is a sweet?
I don't know. It was just something I was thinking of because, like, I try to lump any food into like those six categories, and sometimes I create a seventh one for fat because, like, fat is not sweet, but it is a specific. I don't even know what the word for it. It's not flavor, but just like a sensation. And like, I just try and think about okay, where would I put all of these foods? And like, grain foods, I think you have to call them sweet if you're going to if I'm going to use that kind of system. So like, that's just where it comes from for me. But it's kind of silly to even be that rigid in that system. But I
I would
mean,
say savory for pasta.
huh, that's interesting. I usually think of a savory as foods that like sorry, I lost control of my mouth for a second. Foods that specifically have the umami, what would you call it? The hormone, maybe? I don't know. Just whatever the signaling molecule is. So, and that would be foods like that are have meat in them or tomato. But yeah, I can see the case for it being umami. What's the coolest trip you've ever been on?
The coolest trip? Well, I I have not been on many cool trips. I one time went to all the way to New York to watch a game of Brazil play Argentina,
Oh, nice.
and it was a really great game. It ended up being 4-3 Argentina, but just going all the way up to New York was a nice experience. Seeing that
What'd you think of New York?
really smelly city. It's like I'm more of a Boston man myself because Boston is beautiful and it's not smelly and it has history. When New York is just really kind of gross.
Yeah, the traffic there is horrible.
Yeah, like which one do you like more, Boston or New York?
I've actually no, I have been to Boston. Hmm. Oh, that's a good question. Probably. I'm gonna go New York just because it seems like Boston's kind of on the decline, but Boston's pretty nice too. Just walking through Cambridge, it's a really nice walkable city in comparison to New York, where you have to walk by a bunch of homeless people and worry about getting mugged or something. Would you be able to handle the longest flights in the world, with some of them taking around 17 hours, like something like Auckland, New Zealand to Doha, or like LA to Singapore? Like, would you be willing to fly on those?
Um, wait. if I want to, I don't see any other way around it. So, like, what would have to be done would have to be done. I would just end up charging up my phone and watching a video or doing something, like, just to pass the time. It's going to be an awful experience, but if I have to do it, I have to do it. It like, planes don't, like, give me, like, a bad feeling. I don't enjoy planes, but, like, when I have to go somewhere, I'll get on a plane.
Yeah, it seems like that's really the only way to think about it. Let's see. What foreign language would you most like to learn? Not Spanish?
For that, I would most like to learn. Um, what would I like to learn? Um, well, like, to learn something is different than just, like, gaining the knowledge. Is because, like, I would like to know Mandarin just because it's cool,
Oh, okay. Well,
but
sure, sure. Which
but
would you like to know? Yeah.
like, actually learning it would be an awful experience, and I would never want to do that. So
Well, I don't, it doesn't seem that bad to learn how to speak the language. It just seems terrible to learn how to write it.
yeah, and, like, I don't like having to, like, I dropped um my foreign language as soon as I could because I just hate learning languages.
I just hated the teacher.
Oh yeah,
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 Bijan and I, we took the same Spanish class freshman year, and that was actually how we got to know each other. And we had a class with our class was taught by Professora Rijo, and she was a horrible teacher. Like she did not want to teach the class, and she would just have us do busy work in Spanish, and we didn't learn anything. And frankly, from her, my experience with her, I just wish I did Spanish 1 and then jumped immediately to Spanish 4.
yeah. There was, like, I did, but, like, from Spanish 1 to Spanish 3, actually did not learn anything,
Yeah.
and that is, like, kind of shame.
Yeah, I mean, they would just keep teaching the preterite over and over again. Like, if you're gonna learn it, just learn it. Like, don't just keep doing it.
Yeah, so it was kind of do, and yeah, that made me create a distaste for foreign languages.
Yeah. What do you think about Doctor E? Do you think he's a good teacher?
He, like, it's because if I ask him a question on something I do not understand, like, the way he explains it, it's difficult to understand. So, in the sense of, like, teaching, eh, but I think he's a great person. Despite him not liking me, like, despite him not liking, but I think he is a good person and a very smart man, but maybe not the best teacher.
Yeah. How would you describe him to people who don't know who he is?
Um, he, the way his mind thinks is, like, very complicated. Like, he thinks very jumbled up, and then when he tries to put that into words, he, like, puts everything that's on his mind onto the board, and that can just create confusion rather than actually teaching. But
Yeah.
he is a genius. He went to MIT and got a PhD in physics there. So he's very smart, but boy, does his mind work interesting.
Yeah, I remember him talking about how MIT, or like somebody mentioning that, like he was talking about how he couldn't believe that MIT wanted him back as a professor. He's like, why on earth would MIT want me?
Yeah, yeah, but, like, to graduate, like, in anything, you need to be the best. And, like, physics, they are the best physics school in the world. So he is just above and beyond anybody I have ever met.
Yeah, it's miraculous that we get to have him as a high school teacher.
Yeah, that's the main thing that compelled me to taking physics. See, I knew I wouldn't like I didn't go in the class like trying to like do like thrive on the AP exam. I just wanted to learn like from him and like just learn the general basic physics.
Yeah, I was really sad that I didn't have room in my schedule for it. I didn't even have room for AP World History, which was another thing I really wanted to take. Instead, I wasted 3 years on Spanish and I wasted a year on economics, which really made me mad. I wish I took economics online. I took online PE, and that was a great decision, but I took economics before they really had that as an option because I took a freshman year because I was just like, okay, I'll get rid of this immediately. But
Yeah, it was a waste of class.
yeah,
Like I watched Shark Tank name of learning economics, which I guess Shark Tank has money, which it, like my teacher tied to economics, but that's the extent of it.
yeah, I was not even lucky enough to have that. I had Miss Charney, so that was real fun.
It sounds awful.
Yeah. Uh, so you mentioned that you've been picking up podcasts recently, and I've been curious to see from people who listen to podcasts if they run into the same thing. But for me, picking up podcasts has led to me eventually losing any role for music in my time. Like any time, like I have like my ears free, I'm going to be wanting to listen to podcasts over music because I could feel like I could be informed while being entertained, while just having some mindless entertainment play for music. So essentially, I barely ever listen to music anymore just because the only time I can is when, like a torque problem, the distance between me and music in terms of time has balanced out the actual weight that I can get from music. Have you run into a similar problem?
Yeah, like I've stopped. Like for the most part, I've been listening to music so much less. Like just because like there's nothing you can gain from it, and like I don't listen to it unless if a tune is stuck in my head. But I do enjoy podcasts far more than music because you actually get something out of it rather than mindlessly listening to people rap or sing about things that are irrelevant to you.
Yeah, that's pretty much my feeling as well. Let's see. Okay, so this will be a good final question. So, if you had to pick 5 words to describe yourself, what 5 would you do?
Mm, okay, this is going to be interesting.
Yeah.
Well, apathetic. I am just a very apathetic person. Um, kind, I guess. Like I would classify myself as a kind person. Uh, relatively dull. There isn't much to me. Like I'm a weird person, but like that's all it is. And what else? Oh God, I need to figure out these two other words. Um, oh yeah, like weird. That is a word to describe me.
Yep.
And oof, what's I need to figure out one more word, but it
Calm.
is something. Calm. Yeah, I would say I'm relatively calm most of the time. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty good summary. Okay, well, that wasn't as bad as you thought it was it?
Oh yeah, it was quite easy to end. And this podcast was really fun to do. I enjoyed talking.
All right, well, any other time you want to come on, come on. And for all of you who are listening, thank you for listening. If you guys would like to help the podcast out at all, please review the podcast on iTunes. It's the biggest podcasting player, and it'll be the one that helps us out the most. And really, it's the only way that you can move up the rankings there, and the rankings basically determine which ones are shown. In other news, you can also go to our YouTube channel, Topical Podcast, and you can subscribe. You can give us some views on there if you would like to have some interesting visuals to go with your podcast listening. And yeah, thank you for listening, and have a good day, guys. See ya.